Leslie Charleson, a beloved American actress who passed away on January 12, 2025, at the age of 79. A name that meant so much to so many, especially fans of General Hospital, where she played Monica Quartermain for nearly 5 decades. Her death wasn't sudden, but it was heartbreaking all the same. After suffering multiple falls in recent years, Leslie had trouble moving around and needed a walker just to get by. One of those falls, just a week before she passed, led to a head injury that never fully healed. She was hospitalized, but things didn't improve. The medical examiner later confirmed the cause of death as complications from blunt head trauma, linked to that fall. She also battled several other health issues in her final years: arthritis, asthma, a heart condition, and something called normal pressure hydrocephalus, a brain disorder that slowly affects thinking and walking. Still, through it all, she never lost her spirit. Right up to the end, Leslie held on to her love for the work and the people around her. Her last appearance on General Hospital was in December 2023, and even then, her presence lit up the screen like always. Born in Kansas City, Missouri, on February 22, 1945, Leslie stepped into the world of acting when she was just a teenager. Her career began in 1964 with A Flame in the Wind, and she worked her way through other soap operas like As the World Turns and Love is a Many-Splendored Thing, where she became part of a love triangle that viewers couldn't stop talking about. In the 70s, she showed up on hit shows like The Rockford Files, Happy Days, and The Streets of San Francisco, even starring alongside Shelley Winters in the movie The Day of the Dolphin. But it was in 1977, when she took on the role of Monica Quartermain, that her legacy was truly sealed. She joined General Hospital during a rough time, when ratings were low and the show was struggling, but Leslie helped turn things around. Her character was bold, passionate, and sometimes reckless, but always real. She earned 4 Daytime Emmy nominations and became the longest-running cast member in the show's history. Outside of acting, Leslie gave back as a spokesperson for causes like breast cancer, AIDS, and cystic fibrosis. She had a warm heart, a sharp wit, and an energy that never really faded, even when her body started to give out. Those who knew her personally, like executive producer Frank Valentini, described her as the heart of the cast, someone whose presence brought comfort, laughter, and grace to the set every single day. Her death leaves behind an emptiness that can't be filled. Leslie Charleson wasn't just an actress. She was a part of people's lives, part of their daily routines, their stories, and their memories. And now, she's gone, not with a big goodbye or dramatic exit, but quietly, after a long fight with her health. What remains is everything she gave: the performances, the moments, the legacy, and she'll be missed by all who loved her on screen and off. Natalie Dupree, a remarkable American author, chef, and cooking show host who passed away on January 13, 2025, at the age of 85. Natalie's death came after she suffered a broken hip while living in a retirement community in Raleigh, North Carolina, where she had moved in 2020 to be closer to her husband Jack-based family. Despite efforts to recover, the injury marked the beginning of her final days, and she peacefully passed away, leaving behind a legacy deeply woven into Southern cuisine. Born Natalie Evelyn Meyer on December 23, 1939, in Hamilton, New Jersey, Natalie had a childhood marked by change after her parents' divorce, growing up with her mother in Virginia and Texas. Though she attended college, it was her passion for cooking that defined her path, sparked by a challenging start in a communal kitchen at Harvard in 1958 and later refined at Le Cordon Bleu in London, where she met Julia Child, who inspired her to teach. Natalie's culinary career blossomed as she brought French techniques to Southern American cooking, opening her own restaurant in Georgia and eventually directing a cooking school where thousands learned from her warmth and humor. She became the first woman since Julia Child to host over 100 cooking episodes on public television with her show New Southern Cooking with Natalie Dupree, and went on to create 8 more series, making cooking approachable by encouraging people not to fear mistakes in the kitchen. Natalie authored 15 cookbooks that sold nearly 1 million copies, won multiple James Beard Awards, and was honored as Grande Dame of Les Dames d'Escoffier. Beyond her cooking, she was a champion for women in the culinary world, a community builder who believed in sharing and lifting others, famously teaching the pork chop theory, showing how working together makes everything better. She also stepped into politics with a write-in campaign for Senate in South Carolina, showing her passion extended beyond food. Natalie's last days in Raleigh were quiet, yet filled with the dignity and grace she lived by. Though her health declined after the fall, she remained sharp and spirited, still lighting up a room with her smile and wit. Her passing leaves a profound sadness, but also a lasting impact. A woman who transformed how Southern food is seen, made countless cooks believe in themselves, and built a family of friends and protégés who continue to carry her light. Natalie Dupree wasn't just a chef or author. She was a force of kindness and strength, whose story reminds us how a single life can feed the soul of a culture and inspire generations. Dame Joan Plowright, one of the most respected and beloved English actresses of the 20th century, who sadly passed away on January 16, 2025, at the age of 95, at Denville Hall in Northwood, London. Her final years were marked by a heartbreaking battle with macular degeneration, a condition that slowly robbed her of her sight and ultimately forced her to step away from the stage and screen she loved so deeply. She officially retired in 2014 after becoming legally blind, bringing an end to a career that had touched millions. It's painful to think that someone whose life was built on observing the world, feeling emotions, and expressing them with such honesty had to watch her own world slowly fade into darkness. Her final appearance came in the 2018 documentary Nothing Like a Dame, where she joined fellow legends to reflect on their journeys, even as her own eyes could no longer fully see them. Born Joan Ann Plowright on October 28, 1929, in Brigg, Lincolnshire, she grew up in Scunthorpe, where her father worked as a newspaper editor and her mother, once a ballet hopeful, introduced her to the world of performance through local amateur theater. Joan's path was clear from early on. She trained at the Bristol Old Vic Theatre School and stepped onto the professional stage in 1948. Her rise was steady but solid, and by the mid-1950s, she was performing with the English Stage Company at the Royal Court Theatre, where her talent truly began to shine. In 1957, she starred in The Entertainer opposite Laurence Olivier, whom she later married, becoming his third wife and later, the Baroness Olivier. Though often seen in connection to her famous husband, Joan Plowright carved out a powerful legacy of her own. She won a Tony Award for A Taste of Honey, 2 Golden Globes, a Laurence Olivier Award, and received nominations for an Academy Award, 2 BAFTAs, and an Emmy. She appeared in dozens of films, including Enchanted April, Avalon, Tea with Mussolini, 101 Dalmatians, and Dennis the Menace, and lent her voice to beloved children's movies like Dinosaur and Curious George. On television, her performance in HBO's Stalin won her a Golden Globe. But as time passed, her eyesight began to fail, and it must have been unimaginably difficult for someone whose life had been shaped by the stage to slowly lose her ability to see it. She faced her condition with grace, but there's no doubt it was a painful loss for her and for the world of art. The theater in her hometown, the Plowright Theatre, stands as a tribute to her legacy. Many remember her not just as a brilliant actress, but as someone who brought warmth, strength, and a kind of quiet honesty to every role. Her death marks the end of a chapter in British acting history, one that was full of talent, heart, and a deep love for storytelling. Joan Plowright wasn't just a performer. She was a presence, a soul who brought dignity to every character she portrayed. She leaves behind a career that spanned more than 60 years, and a memory that will last far beyond that. Cecile Richards, a lifelong activist and former president of Planned Parenthood, who passed away on January 20, 2025, at the age of 67 after a quiet but difficult battle with cancer. Her death shocked many who knew her as a tireless fighter for women's rights, someone whose voice never seemed to tire, whose strength never seemed to fade. In her final days, Cecile kept her illness private, choosing instead to focus her energy on uplifting others, continuing to support causes she believed in, and refusing to let her pain define her legacy. It was only in the last few weeks that her condition became known to a small circle of friends and family. She spent her final moments surrounded by loved ones, in peace, but leaving behind a world that still very much needed her. Cecile's journey began in Waco, Texas, born to Ann Richards, who would go on to become the governor of Texas, and David Richards, a civil rights lawyer. She grew up in a home full of activism and strong values, and even as a teenager, she stood up against the Vietnam War, once getting in trouble for wearing a black armband in protest. That fire carried her through her life, organizing labor workers, standing with underrepresented communities, and later leading Planned Parenthood through some of its most turbulent and defining years. She was never afraid of a fight, whether it was in Congress or on the streets, and her leadership from 2006 to 2018 helped shape the national conversation around reproductive rights. Beyond Planned Parenthood, she co-founded Supermajority, an organization focused on building women's political power, and served on the board of the Ford Foundation. Cecile was a believer in action, not just words. She didn't just talk about change, she built it, block by block, person by person. Her book, Make Trouble, gave us a glimpse into her life, her strength, her mistakes, and her drive to never stay silent. But it's the way she carried herself in her last days that speaks the loudest now, graceful, determined, and still holding on to hope. Cecile Richards will be remembered not just for what she did, but for how she made people feel seen, heard, and valued. Her loss leaves a deep ache, but also a reminder that one life, lived with courage, can shake the world. Jan Shepard, born Josephine Angela Sorbello, an American actress who passed away on January 17, 2025, at the age of 96, after suffering from pneumonia caused by respiratory failure at Providence St. Joseph Medical Center in Burbank, California. Her final days were quiet but heavy, spent in the hospital where her body slowly gave in to the infection. Despite her age, her passing still hits hard for those who admired her long journey through Hollywood. Her son, Brandon Boyle, who works in the film industry himself, shared the news and said, "She was a good one and will be dearly missed." Jan had lived through nearly a century of change, from the black and white screen days to modern cinema. But her story began in a small town, Quakertown, Pennsylvania, where she was born on March 19, 1928, to Sicilian parents, Mr. and Mrs. Sam Sorbello. A smart and active young girl, she was valedictorian of her class, a cheerleader, and a drum majorette. She moved to Los Angeles in 1949 to chase her dream, joining the Ben Bard Players and training at the Pasadena Playhouse. Jan started small, even working as a clerk in a department store, but she pushed through and found her place on screen. She played opposite Elvis Presley in 2 films, first in King Creole in 1958 as his sister, and then in Paradise, Hawaiian Style in 1966. In a heartfelt moment, she once recalled how Elvis changed after the army, from a fun-loving kid to someone surrounded by bodyguards. Her film career also included cult classics like Attack of the Giant Leeches and deeply emotional films like Third of a Man. But where Jan truly left her mark was on TV, especially in westerns. She appeared in shows like Rawhide, The Virginian, Gunsmoke, and The High Chaparral, shaping what many remember as the golden age of television. She had a warmth and strength in her roles that audiences loved, and her face became a familiar one in American homes. Beyond the screen, Jan had a loving and lasting marriage with actor Ray Boyle from 1954 until his death in 2022. They shared decades together in a life filled with both Hollywood spotlight and personal love. She also had connections with many stars, even rooming with Amanda Blake before Gunsmoke made her famous. In the end, it wasn't fame or fortune that defined Jan Shepard, but her steady dedication to her work, her resilience through decades of change, and the quiet strength she carried with her until the very end. Her passing may have come quietly in a hospital room, but the life she lived left behind a loud echo in film, television, and in the hearts of those who grew up watching her. Nancy Lieutenant Colon, a true pioneer and American nurse who quietly broke down walls of racial discrimination and served her country with dignity and strength. Nancy passed away peacefully on January 8, 2025, at the remarkable age of 104, at a nursing home in Amityville, New York, after living a long, full life that spanned over a century. Her final days were spent surrounded by family in a place she called home. Yet her death marked the closing of a chapter on an extraordinary life defined by courage, resilience, and quiet determination. Born on September 29, 1920, in Goose Creek, South Carolina. As one of 12 children to Eunice and James Lieutenant, Nancy grew up in a family shaped by the legacy of slavery. Her grandfather was a freed slave and moved north to Amityville, New York, in 1923 seeking better opportunities. From a young age, she dreamed of becoming a nurse, inspired by a picture of an Army nurse that stuck with her. She graduated high school in 1939, trained at the Lincoln School for Nurses in the Bronx, one of the first nursing schools to train black women, and worked in hospitals before joining the Army Nurse Corps as a reservist in 1945. In a time when the military was still segregated, Nancy became the first African-American nurse to join the regular United States Army Nurse Corps after desegregation in 1948, serving first with the all-black 332nd Fighter Group at Lockburn Air Force Base. Her service took her through some of the most difficult moments in history. She served as a flight nurse in the Korean and Vietnam Wars, helping evacuate wounded soldiers and setting up hospital wards overseas. One story that stands out is how she and a flight surgeon delivered a premature baby at an airbase after a local hospital refused care due to the mother's race. The baby, weighing just 3 pounds, survived against the odds. Nancy rose to the rank of major and retired in 1965 as the chief nurse at McGuire Air Force Base. After her military career, she continued serving her community as a school nurse in Amityville until 1984. Known for her hopeful saying, "The sky is the limit." Beyond nursing, Nancy was deeply involved with the Tuskegee Airmen organization, becoming the first woman president of the group and carrying on the legacy of her brother, a Tuskegee Airman pilot who tragically died in a mid-air collision during World War II. She was recognized with honorary degrees and countless honors, but always stayed humble, insisting she was just doing her part. The real tragedy in Nancy's passing is the loss of a figure who witnessed and shaped history firsthand, someone who lived through segregation and war, yet never let those hardships stop her from breaking barriers for others. In her last days, Nancy's family remembers her as strong, authentic, and full of stories that captured the struggles and victories of her lifetime. Her death reminds us not just of what she achieved, but of the long fight for equality and respect that still echoes today. Nancy Lieutenant Colin's life was more than her title or awards. It was a quiet battle fought every day with dignity and heart, leaving behind a path for many who followed. Today, as we honor her memory, we feel the weight of losing someone who was a true trailblazer, a healer, and a humble hero. Loretta Cecilia Ford, an extraordinary American nurse whose pioneering spirit forever changed healthcare. Loretta, who lived an incredible 104 years, passed away peacefully on January 22, 2025, in Wildwood, Florida. She was the co-founder of the very first nurse practitioner program, which she launched alongside Dr. Henry Silver in 1965 at the University of Colorado, a program that would transform nursing from a supportive role into a vital clinical profession. Born on December 28, 1920, in New York City and raised in New Jersey, Loretta's early life was shaped by modest beginnings. She initially dreamed of being a teacher, but turned to nursing due to her family's financial situation. Starting as a nurse's aide at 16, she quickly grew passionate about nursing, earning her diploma, then going on to serve in the Army Air Force during World War II after the tragic loss of her fiance. After the war, she studied public health nursing and earned a doctorate in nursing education, dedicating her career to improving healthcare access and nursing education. But Loretta's greatest struggle was breaking through the medical community's resistance to her vision. Many doctors initially opposed the idea of nurses being trained as advanced practitioners, fearing it would undermine their authority. Despite facing harsh criticism, even hate mail, Loretta persevered, determined to create a system where nurses could provide essential care, especially in underserved communities. Her work led to the creation of nurse practitioner programs that now support hundreds of thousands of healthcare providers across the country. In her later years, Loretta became the founding dean of the University of Rochester School of Nursing, where she developed a holistic approach that combined education, research, and clinical practice. Her final days were quiet, marked by the dignity of a long life dedicated to service and innovation. Though she passed away due to natural causes related to her advanced age, the loss is deeply felt by the nursing community and the world she helped shape. Loretta Ford was not just a nurse. She was a leader, a visionary, and a fighter for better healthcare for all. Her life reminds us that one person's courage and dedication can change the course of history. Today, as we mourn her passing, we also celebrate a life lived with purpose and a legacy that will inspire generations to come. Iris Cummings, an incredible American aviator and athlete who passed away on January 24, 2025, at the remarkable age of 104 in Claremont, California. Iris was not just an Olympic swimmer, but a true pioneer in aviation, whose life spans some of the most challenging and inspiring chapters of the 20th century. Born on December 21, 1920, in Los Angeles, Iris grew up in a family that valued sports and education. Her father was a doctor and an athletics coach, and her mother a language teacher. From a young age, Iris was drawn to swimming. Inspired by her father's coaching and the Olympic spirit she witnessed firsthand at the 1932 Los Angeles Games. By 1936, she was the U.S. national champion in the 200-meter breaststroke and earned a spot on the American Olympic team to compete in Berlin, a tense and dangerous place under the shadow of Nazi Germany. Despite struggling to raise money for the trip and barely having time to train, Iris showed courage and determination. Though she didn't medal, she remained the national champion until 1939. But as war clouds gathered over the world and the 1940 Olympics were canceled, Iris shifted her focus to flying, entering USC's first civilian pilot training program in 1939. She became a flight instructor and then bravely served as a ferry pilot with the Women Air Force Service pilots during World War II, flying more than 25 types of military aircraft, including fighters and bombers, helping to support the war effort while breaking barriers for women in aviation. After the war, Iris devoted herself to teaching and developing aeronautics programs for veterans and students, co-founding the Bates Aeronautics program at Harvey Mudd College and inspiring generations of pilots, scientists, and even astronauts. Her dedication was recognized by many honors, including induction into the National Flight Instructors Hall of Fame and the California Aviation Hall of Fame. In her last years, she remained active in the aviation community, sharing her knowledge and passion, a living connection to a historic era. Her passing marks the loss of the last known survivor of the 1936 U.S. Olympic team and one of the last links to a generation that faced unimaginable trials with grace and courage. Iris lived a full, rich life, but her final days were peaceful, passing away due to natural causes at her home, surrounded by the legacy of a century of achievements and a life that lifted others. Today, we mourn not only the loss of a remarkable woman, but also celebrate her spirit, her fearless heart, her trailblazing path in sports and flight, and the quiet strength she carried until the end. Iris Cummings was not just a name in history. She was a symbol of courage, passion, and dedication, a true pioneer who showed what it means to live fully and leave the world better than you found it. Melba Joyce Montgomery, a remarkable American country singer and songwriter who passed away on January 15, 2025, at the age of 86, after battling dementia in a care facility in Nashville. Her final days were quiet, but marked by the painful decline that dementia brings, slowly taking away the sharpness of a woman whose voice once moved millions. Melba's journey began in Iron City, Tennessee, born into a musical family on October 14, 1938, and raised near Florence, Alabama. Her father taught singing at the local Methodist church, where Melba first found her voice, and by the age of 10, she was already gifted a guitar, setting the stage for a life deeply rooted in music. Alongside her brothers Carl and Earl, who also became respected songwriters, Melba won a talent contest in Nashville, catching the eye of Roy Acuff, a country music legend, who invited her to join his touring band. This early break led to a career that would span decades, where she became best known as the soulful female voice alongside George Jones with hits like "We Must Have Been Out of Our Minds," a song she wrote herself, which captured hearts with its raw emotion and harmony. Melba's unique style, often called the female George Jones, blended Appalachian and bluegrass roots with a voice full of honest feeling, earning her a lasting place in country music history. While she had solo success, especially with the 1974 hit "No Charge," an emotional song about motherhood that touched listeners far beyond the country charts, her duets with George Jones, Gene Pitney, and Charlie Louvin became the highlights of her career, influencing generations of country artists to come. Beyond performing, she was a gifted songwriter, penning songs that other greats like George Strait and Tammy Wynette brought to life, cementing her legacy not only as a singer, but as a storyteller through song. Despite her professional triumphs, her last years were shadowed by the heartbreak of dementia, a cruel disease that slowly dimmed the light of a woman who once sang so clearly and powerfully. The world lost her gentle, soulful presence on that cold January day, but Melba Montgomery's music remains, a timeless reminder of a life devoted to the truth and spirit of country music. Her passing is deeply mourned by family, friends, and fans who remember not just the songs, but the heartfelt soul behind them. Marianne Faithfull, the legendary singer and actress whose voice and story shaped generations, passed away peacefully at the age of 78, surrounded by her family in London. Her life was filled with music, heartbreak, resilience, and fame, but in the end, it was years of health struggles that led to her tragic passing. Decades of smoking had left her battling emphysema, and though she survived a brutal 22-day hospital stay with COVID-19 back in 2020 when doctors feared the worst, it left lasting damage. In her final years, she also lived with breast cancer and had suffered from bulimia in earlier times. Her health slowly declined, and despite her fighting spirit, her body gave in after so many battles. Born in Hampstead in 1946, Marianne's story began in an aristocratic family touched by war, hardship, and deep culture. Her mother was a ballerina, her father a British intelligence officer, and her roots tied her to the Sacher-Masoch family, where even the term masochism finds its origin. Raised by her mother after her parents' divorce, Marianne faced tuberculosis as a child and grew up with less than many would imagine, especially for someone destined to be a symbol of the glamorous 60s. At just 16, she was discovered at a party by the Rolling Stones manager, and before long, her haunting rendition of "As Tears Go By" made her a household name. She became the face of an era, gracing stages, screens, and tabloids with a mix of beauty and boldness. Her romance with Mick Jagger inspiring timeless songs like "Wild Horses." But fame wasn't kind. The 70s broke her down: addiction, homelessness, and a voice that changed forever due to heroin and illness. Yet, from those ashes came one of the most powerful comebacks in music history. In 1979, she released Broken English, an album soaked in pain, truth, and grit, earning her critical acclaim and a Grammy nomination. Her raw, smoky voice told stories the bright-eyed girl from the 60s never could, and people listened. She kept creating, collaborating with icons like Nick Cave, Lou Reed, and Metallica, and writing books that later soul bare. Acting stayed close to her heart too. She played Ophelia, God, and even the devil, proving her depth as a performer. Despite the pain, the sickness, and everything she lived through, she never stopped turning sorrow into art. Her 2018 album, Negative Capability, was a final, heart-wrenching reflection on grief and aging, and it brought her career full circle with a stripped-down, emotional take on As Tears Go By that moved everyone in the studio to tears. Even after death, her voice lingers. A final EP, Burning Moonlight, was released just weeks after her passing. Marianne Faithfull wasn't just a singer or an actress. She was a survivor, a symbol, a soul who wore every scar with grace. From her early days in London to the streets of Soho, and finally to the quiet room where she took her last breath, hers was a life of beauty and tragedy, music, and silence. And through it all, she stayed true to who she was, a fighter with a voice the world will never forget. John Quick to C. Smith, the Native American artist, educator, and activist who passed away on January 24, 2025, at the age of 85 after a fight with pancreatic cancer. Her death left a deep void not just in the world of art, but in the hearts of those she inspired with her fierce voice, bold colors, and unwavering love for her people. In her final days, Smith remained at her home in Corrales, New Mexico, surrounded by family and the land she loved so much, quietly battling an illness that had already taken so much from her body, but never touched her spirit. Her cancer was aggressive and advanced by the time it was diagnosed, and though she faced it with strength, it took her life quickly, cutting short a story that still had so much more to give. It's heartbreaking to think of her slowly fading away, when she had always been so full of fire, passion, and truth. Smith was born in poverty in 1940 on the Flathead Reservation in Montana, raised by a single father who traded horses and moved across reservations. She grew up knowing struggle, working in fields as a child, and being told by teachers she couldn't be an artist because she was a Native woman. But she didn't listen. She kept pushing, taking classes when she could, working every kind of job just to stay afloat, and finally earning her art degrees, including a master's from the University of New Mexico. Her art was never just about beauty, it was about truth. Her work told stories of stolen land, of Native identity, of environmental harm and political pain. Through paintings, prints, and collages, she held up a mirror to a country that often tried to ignore what it had done to people like her. Museums across the country, from the MoMA to the Smithsonian, recognized her brilliance and her voice. She broke barriers when the National Gallery of Art bought her piece, I See Red, Target, the first painting by a Native American artist to be added to their collection. But beyond the walls of galleries, she spent her life supporting other Native artists, curating shows, organizing, and mentoring. She didn't just make space for herself, she built a road for others to walk. Smith's legacy isn't just in the awards she won or the places she exhibited. It's in the way she stood up, again and again, for people who were overlooked and forgotten. It's in the way she turned her life into a message, a warning, and a hope. She gave everything she had to her people, to her art, and to the truth. And now that she's gone, the world feels a little less brave without her. Olga James, a remarkable singer and actress who passed away on January 25, 2025, at the age of 95 in Los Angeles due to complications from a fall that sadly broke her pelvis, leading to her final days in an assisted living facility. Olga's death marks the end of a long, extraordinary life touched by both incredible talent and quiet struggles. Born on February 16, 1929, in Washington, D.C., she grew up in a family surrounded by music and dance. Her father was a saxophonist and her mother a dancer on the Chitlin circuit. But after her parents separated, she was raised by her grandparents. Showing early promise, Olga earned a scholarship to the Juilliard School of Music, where she studied opera and befriended future star Leontyne Price. Though classically trained, she preferred Mozart art songs and French chansons, and it was through her connections there that she began her professional career, performing in Paris in Virgil Thomson's opera Four Saints in 3 acts in 1952. Soon after, she toured with Larry Steele's all-black revue Smart Affairs and caught the eye of Otto Preminger, landing her the role of Cindy Lou in the groundbreaking 1954 film Carmen Jones. This film, known for its all-black cast and operatic roots, became her most famous role, where she shined with her own powerful voice while co-stars' singing was dubbed. She was often called the sepia Leslie Caron, and her portrayal of the loyal but heartbroken Cindy Lou touched many hearts. In 1956, she made her Broadway debut opposite Sammy Davis Jr. in Mr. Wonderful, further proving her stage presence and vocal strength. Despite these successes, Olga's career was often limited by the racial barriers of the time, and she rarely had roles on such a big stage afterward. She also had a recurring role on The Bill Cosby Show and lent her voice to the cartoon Syllab 2020. In her personal life, She married jazz great Julian Cannonball Adderley in 1962, staying with him until his death in 1975, and later was married to folk musician Len Chandler until he passed in 2023. Olga's last years were marked by quiet dignity, far from the bright lights she once knew. But her legacy lives on in the history of Black performers who broke barriers and shared their gifts despite the odds. The tragic fall that led to her death was a harsh reminder of how fragile life can be, even after a long and full life filled with music, art, and love. Today, we honor Olga James, not just for her unforgettable roles and voice, but for the courage she showed living her life as a talented Black woman in a world that often tried to hold her back. Today, we remember Virginia Hollis McCaskey, who passed away on February 6, 2025, at the age of 102, marking the end of an era not just for the Chicago Bears, but for the entire history of American football. She was more than just a team owner. She was the daughter of George Hollis, the man who built the Bears and helped create the NFL itself. And she carried that legacy for over 4 decades as the principal owner of the team. Her death, while not sudden, was deeply felt across the league. She died peacefully, surrounded by loved ones, after a long, full life that mixed faith, family, and football into something truly rare. In her final years, she kept a low public profile, but she was still the heart of the franchise. Her family, in their tribute, said she's now reunited with the love of her life, Ed McCaskey, and that brings some comfort, but the loss still weighs heavy. Virginia's story is deeply emotional because it stretches back to the very beginning of the NFL. As a toddler, she was carried through train stations during Red Grange's barnstorming tours so fans wouldn't mob the football superstar. She saw the first indoor NFL game in 1932, watched the Bears win 4 league titles in the 1940s, and took control of the team after her father's death in 1983. She was 60 at the time and ended up leading them to one of the greatest seasons in league history, the 1985 Super Bowl win. Her voice quivered with joy when she accepted the George Hollis Trophy in 2007, calling it her happiest moment. But behind all of this history, there was always a quiet woman who lived her life with strength, dignity, and deep personal faith. She wasn't flashy. She didn't chase the spotlight. She just loved her team and her family. She married Ed McCaskey in 1943 and raised 11 children. Together, they shaped the Bears culture. Even after Ed died in 2003, she stayed involved in the team's day-to-day, hosting events, meeting players, and keeping the spirit of her father alive. Virginia never wanted awards or attention. She even turned down the Pro Football Hall of Fame's Ralph Hay Pioneer Award, saying she didn't feel worthy. That humility was who she was. She always remembered names, always had time for rookies, and believed deeply in what her family had built. She watched from the stands, quietly cheering, proudly supporting. Even as the NFL grew into a billion-dollar business, she remained that same girl who once bragged to her classmates that she knew Red Grange, returning the next day with a photo signed just for her. She may be gone now, buried next to her husband in Des Plaines, Illinois, but her impact will never be buried. She was the longest tenured owner in the NFL, the oldest owner in all major league sports, and the last living bridge to football's earliest days. What she built, what she carried forward, can't be replaced. Today, her absence leaves a huge hole in the heart of the Bears organization and in the NFL itself. She wasn't just part of history, she was history. Anne Marie Hochhalter, an American anti-gun violence activist and survivor of the 1999 Columbine High School shooting, who sadly passed away on February 16, 2025, at just 43 years old. Her death, heartbreaking as it is, was ruled a homicide caused by sepsis, a complication that stemmed from the gunshot wounds she suffered 26 years earlier during the attack that forever changed her life. Anne Marie was only 17 when she was shot in the back and chest by one of the shooters at Columbine, leaving her paralyzed from the waist down and in constant nerve pain. Her body fought hard for decades, but in the end, the damage done by that terrible day finally caught up with her. The final years of her life were a mix of pain, strength, and quiet endurance. She lived independently in Westminster, Colorado, always trying to make the best of her situation, even as her health slowly declined. Those closest to her say she never liked to be called a victim. She wanted to be seen as a survivor, someone who kept pushing forward no matter how hard life hit her. But Anne Marie's journey was filled with loss. Just 6 months after the shooting, her mother, struggling with depression, walked into a pawn shop, asked to see a revolver, and ended her own life. Something Anne Marie later said she could never truly understand. There were dark moments, like the time she lived in isolation in the mountains and quietly considered ending her own life. But slowly, through faith and sheer determination, she began to rebuild. She learned to drive again, bought her own home, worked at Bath and Body Works, and even became a manager. She shared her story to help others, counseled those with disabilities, and stood up against gun violence, pushing for change so no one else would have to live what she lived. She also loved animals, especially dogs, and music filled her world. She played the clarinet, harp, piano, and guitar. One of her happiest memories was floating pain-free in the ocean on a trip to Hawaii with the Townsends, the family of another Columbine victim, who had taken her in like a daughter. That brief time without pain was rare. Her brother, Nathan, said she was a student who loved reading, and above all else, loved her mom deeply. In 2016, she even forgave the mother of one of the shooters in a heartfelt public letter, showing just how big her heart truly was. Anne Marie never wanted pity. She just wanted people to understand that she kept going, even when it hurt, even when no one saw it. Her life was shaped by violence, but not defined by it. She stood for strength, for resilience, for hope in the face of endless pain. And now that she's gone, we remember her not just as a survivor of one of the darkest days in American history, but as a fighter who carried that weight for 26 long years. May she rest in peace, far away from the pain that followed her for so long. Alice Herson, a gifted American actress whose long life came to an end on February 14, 2025, at the age of 95, due to natural causes. She passed away at the Motion Picture and Television Country House and Hospital in Woodland Hills, California, where she had been staying for about a year. In her final days, Alice was surrounded by care and comfort, her mind still sharp, and her last words, "It's nice to have an audience," captured the spirit of someone who lived to perform. Her death wasn't sudden, but it still leaves a heavy sadness in the hearts of those who loved her work and her presence. She had been quietly fading, her health slowly declining with age. Yet even in her last moments, she carried herself with the same grace that defined her career. Born Alice Corinne Thorsell on March 10, 1929, in Brooklyn and raised on Long Island, her love for acting started early. After graduating from the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in 1948, she began performing on stage and eventually moved into television, where she became a familiar face across American households for decades. She was best known for her roles as Mavis Anderson on the hit primetime soap Dallas and as Lois Morgan, the sweet but unaware mother of Ellen DeGeneres' character on Ellen, a groundbreaking show where her role touched many during a time of change. Alice also held major roles on daytime soaps like One Life to Live, The Edge of Night, Another World, and General Hospital. Her career stretched from Broadway stages to soap operas, sitcoms, and big screen films like Private Benjamin and Revenge of the Nerds. She was a character actress through and through, never chasing the spotlight, but always leaving a strong mark. Off the screen, she was a mother, a wife, and someone who truly loved the art of storytelling. She was married to actor Stephen Elliott until his death in 2005, and she raised 2 sons from her earlier marriage to writer Roger O. Herson. Her son David, a playwright, said she always saw herself as a stage actress first, and it amazed him how she juggled being a mom while working long hours on multiple shows. Alice Herson wasn't a loud star, but she was the kind you always remembered, calm, kind, and always convincing. Her passing marks the end of a chapter in classic television history, and though she's gone, the memories she gave us will live on. She truly earned her final audience. Roberta Flack, the legendary American singer and pianist whose soft yet powerful voice touched the soul of millions. She passed away on February 24, 2025, at the age of 88, after years of battling amyotrophic lateral sclerosis (ALS), also known as Lou Gehrig's disease, a cruel and progressive illness that slowly robbed her of her ability to speak and move. In her final years, Roberta could no longer sing, play the piano, or even talk, and this silence, after a life so filled with music, was perhaps the saddest part of her journey. Diagnosed in late 2022, the disease quickly took over, forcing her to step away from public life and the very things that gave her joy. She spent her last days in New York City, surrounded by a small circle of close friends, caretakers, and memories of a career that left a permanent mark on music history. She once had a voice that made time stand still, but in her final moments, the world was heartbreakingly quiet around her. Born in Black Mountain, North Carolina, Roberta was raised in a musical family that struggled financially, but love for music kept them close. Her father gave her a beat-up old piano when she was a little girl, and she learned to play while sitting on her mother's lap. By the age of 15, she had won a full scholarship to Howard University, becoming one of the youngest students to enroll there. Roberta started as a pianist, but switched to voice, and from there, her talent only grew. Before she became a global star, she was a teacher, trying to make ends meet after the sudden death of her father. Her rise to fame came after a chance performance caught the attention of soul singer Les McCann, which led to a record deal and eventually a song, "The First Time Ever I Saw Your Face," that would change everything. That song became the biggest hit of 1972, stayed at #1 for 6 straight weeks, and earned her a Grammy. She made history as the first artist to win Record of the Year 2 years in a row. Her other unforgettable hits like "Killing Me Softly with a Song" and "Feel Like Making Love" made her a household name. Roberta was known for her gentle, deeply emotional style that blended R&B, jazz, folk, and pop, and her duets with Donny Hathaway gave the world songs like "Where Is the Love" and "The Closer I Get to You." Behind the fame, Roberta was also a kind-hearted woman who gave back to the community, starting a music school for underprivileged kids and standing up for causes like animal rights and LGBTQ+ equality. Her voice was soft but strong, and her music was personal, full of feeling, and impossible to forget. Even as critics sometimes didn't understand her quiet power, listeners around the world connected with her in a deep, human way. And now, as we say goodbye to Roberta Flack, we remember not just the music she gave us, but the silence she endured with such quiet grace. Her life was full of beauty and pain, love and loss. And though ALS took her voice in the end, her songs will keep speaking for her forever. Lynn Marie Stewart, the beloved American actress who passed away on February 21, 2025, at the age of 78, after a heartbreaking and unexpected battle with cancer. Just a couple of months before her death, she had wrapped up filming her final movie, The Dink, when she began feeling tired and unwell. What started as simple exhaustion quickly turned into something much more serious. Doctors found a tumor between her liver and gallbladder. The news came as a shock to everyone, even Lynn herself. The illness took her quickly, leaving those who knew her stunned and grieving. In her final hours, she was surrounded by family and love, and the day before she passed, the director of her last film kindly sent over a copy so she could watch it with her loved ones, giving her one last moment of peace and pride in her work. Known for her warmth and humor, Lynn never cared for fame or money. She lived for the craft and for bringing joy to others. Her death has left a deep hole in the hearts of fans and friends alike. Charlie Day, her TV son from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, said it best when he called her brilliant and thanked her for all the years of laughter. Her friend and co-star Paul Rubens, who passed in 2023, shared a special bond with Lynn, one that lasted a lifetime. Together, they made magic as Pee Wee Herman and Miss Yvonne, the most beautiful woman in Puppetland. From her early days in Linwood, California, to her work with the Groundlings in the 1970s, where she met comedy legends like Phil Hartman and Rubens, Lynn built a career full of charm, heart, and genuine talent. She was a standout on shows like Moz H, Laverne and Shirley, and of course, Pee-wee's Playhouse, which made her a cultural icon in the 80s. Later generations came to love her as Charlie's chain-smoking mom, Bonnie Kelly, on It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. She also gave memorable performances in films like Bridesmaids, Pee-wee's Big Adventure, and The Running Man. She was never married and didn't have children of her own, but she was deeply loved by her sister, Gail, and by Cindy Williams' children, who called her family. Her ashes were scattered in the Rose Garden at Hollywood Forever Cemetery, a place full of stars, where she now rests among peers who shaped American entertainment. Lynn Marie Stewart gave her life to her art and to bringing laughter to others, especially children, through her work with the Make-A-Wish Foundation. Her death was quick, painful, and far too soon, but her memory will live on in every smile she gave us, every laugh she sparked, and every heart she touched. Next, we remember the deeply soulful voice and powerful legacy of Gwen McCrae, the beloved American singer whose music moved hearts across the world, but whose final years were filled with pain and silence. Gwen passed away on February 21, 2025, in a care home in Miami at the age of 81, after a long illness that had slowly taken away the very thing that defined her, her ability to sing. Her decline began in June 2012 when, just after performing on stage in England, she suffered a massive stroke that left the left side of her body paralyzed and took away her ability to walk. From that point on, Gwen disappeared from the stage she once lit up, and for over a decade she lived quietly, away from the spotlight, facing a battle she couldn't sing her way out of. Her family shared that while their hearts are heavy, they are comforted knowing that she is no longer in pain. Born Gwendolyn Patricia Mosley in Pensacola, Florida, Gwen was the youngest of 5 children raised by a single mother after their father died early. She started singing in church at just 7 years old and began performing in clubs during her teenage years. Music was always in her, and it stayed with her through every chapter of life. She married sailor and fellow singer George McCrae within a week of meeting him, and they began recording music together. Eventually, Gwen carved out her own space as a solo artist, and in 1975, she made history with her hit Rockin' Chair, which soared to #1 on the R&B charts and #9 on the Billboard Hot 100. Her voice, a deep and emotional blend of gospel, soul, funk, and disco, was one of a kind. It was raw, real, and unforgettable. Known as the Queen of Rare Groove, Gwen's songs like Funky Sensation, All This Love That I'm Given, and Keep the Fire Burning became underground anthems, especially in Europe, where her music stayed alive on dance floors long after radio stations stopped playing them. Even artists like Lady Gaga, Avicii Madlib, and Mobb Deep sampled her work, keeping her sound alive in new generations. Though she never again matched the mainstream success of her 1975 hit, Gwen's presence in the music world was lasting. She recorded albums across decades, performed well into her later years, and even tried her hand at gospel. But the stroke in 2012 was devastating. It took her off stage for good, and she never recovered. Her life had many highs, but her last chapter was marked by quiet suffering. Despite that, she remained a symbol of strength and love for her children and fans. Gwen McCrae didn't just make music, she gave people something to feel, something to dance to, something to remember. And though she's gone, her voice will still echo in every sample, every track, and every heart that ever felt something deep when one of her songs came on. Michelle Christine Trachtenberg, a beloved American actress whose life ended far too soon at the age of 39 due to complications from diabetes, following a long and quiet battle with health issues that she kept mostly private. Michelle was found unresponsive by her mother in her Manhattan apartment on the morning of February 26, 2025, just months after undergoing a liver transplant in 2024, a procedure that came after growing concerns about her rapid weight loss and jaundice, which she had tried to downplay on social media by telling fans she was happy and healthy. But behind the scenes, those close to her knew she had been really sick and struggling, and when emergency services arrived, they could do nothing but pronounce her dead at the scene. Her family, following their Jewish beliefs, refused an autopsy, and since there were no signs of foul play, the medical examiner respected that, initially listing her cause of death as undetermined. Only months later, toxicology reports revealed the heartbreaking truth. Michelle had died from complications tied to her diabetes, likely worsened by the toll her liver transplant took on her body. She was quietly cremated, and her ashes were scattered in Central Park. Born on October 11, 1985, in New York City to immigrant parents, her father from Germany and her mother from Russia, Michelle started her acting career as a toddler doing commercials, and by 8, she was lighting up TV screens as Nona on Nickelodeon's The Adventures of Pete and Pete. Her big break came with Harriet the Spy in 1996, and she soon became a household name through roles in Inspector Gadget, Buffy the Vampire Slayer as Dawn Summers, and Gossip Girl as the unforgettable Georgina Sparks. Her career was filled with achievements, Young Artist Awards, Saturn nominations, and a Daytime Emmy nod, but it was her humanity, vulnerability, and the way she brought raw truth to her roles that made her unforgettable. She spoke openly about being bullied in school, supported anti-drug and anti-bullying campaigns, and bravely stood with her co-stars against abuse in the entertainment industry. Michelle lived a life of creativity and resilience, loved poetry and skating, and even studied ballet as a child. She had many passions, many friends, and was in a committed relationship with her agent Jay Cohen. She gave her heart to her work, her family, and her fans, and even though her last years were difficult, filled with health struggles and hidden pain, she carried herself with strength and tried to keep smiling. Her death hit hard, not just because we lost a talented actress, but because we lost someone who grew up in front of us, someone who was real. Tributes poured in from co-stars like Sarah Michelle Gellar and Rosie O'Donnell, with many sharing how much she meant to them and how deeply she struggled in her final years. Michelle wasn't just a star. She was someone who made people feel seen, someone who gave everything she had to her craft and fought silently through her pain. Now she's gone, and the sadness of it lingers, but so does the light she left behind. Today, we remember Melody Beattie, a woman whose words saved lives, but whose own life ended quietly and sadly on February 27, 2025, at the age of 76, after a long battle with heart problems. Melody, the Minnesota-born author who gave the world one of the most powerful self-help books ever written, Codependent No More, died from congestive heart failure just weeks after she was forced to evacuate her Malibu home during the Southern California wildfires. She had been in and out of the hospital for nearly 2 weeks, and too weak to return home, spent her final days under hospice care at her daughter Nicole's house in Las Vegas. Those close to her say her heart had been slowly giving out, both physically and maybe in some ways, emotionally too. Her journey was never easy. Born Melody Lynn Vaillancourt in Ramsey, Minnesota, she endured the kind of pain most never speak of, molested at just 5, growing up with a mother who abused her siblings, and turning to alcohol by age 12. By 18, she was addicted to heroin, caught up in crime, and spiraling. She got sober only after being arrested trying to rob a pharmacy and being forced into treatment, where she said she felt God's presence and finally found clarity. That moment changed everything. From the depths of addiction, she rose to become a guiding voice for millions struggling with emotional wounds they didn't even know had names. As a counselor, she met wives of addicts, saw herself in them, and realized there was something deeper going on, something she later called codependency. With just a $500 advance and writing from a basement while raising her children alone, she poured everything she had into Codependent No More, which sold over 8 million copies and gave people language for their pain. Her son Shane's tragic death in a skiing accident in 1991 nearly broke her again, but she turned her grief into another book, The Lessons of Love, and kept writing, helping others through her own scars. Her marriages, 4 in total, all ended, often shadowed by the same struggles she wrote about. But through it all, she never stopped speaking from the heart. Even in her last years, she stayed active, skydiving, connecting with people online, and reminding everyone that healing wasn't about perfection, it was about honesty. Her final chapter came quietly, not in the blaze of fame, but in the soft, painful hush of a heart that had carried too much for too long. She is survived by her children, grandchildren, and the millions of people who found pieces of themselves in her books. Melody didn't just write about pain, she lived it, survived it, and turned it into hope for others. And that's how she'll be remembered. Today, we remember Angie Stone, the gifted American singer-songwriter, rapper, and actress, who tragically passed away at the age of 63 in a horrific car crash on March 1, 2025. Angie and her band were driving back to Atlanta from a Mardi Gras show in Mobile, Alabama, when their van flipped on the highway near Montgomery and was then struck by a semi-truck. She was the only one who didn't make it. Her final moments were spent doing what she loved, performing and traveling with music in her heart. But fate dealt her a cruel hand on that road. Losing her this way feels especially heartbreaking because she had survived so many challenges in life, from early industry struggles to health battles with diabetes, and still came out stronger every time. Born Angela Laverne Brown in Columbia, South Carolina, she grew up in a working-class family surrounded by gospel and soul. Her dad, part of a local gospel group, introduced her to music early on, and by 16, she had already made history with her all-female hip-hop trio The Sequence, breaking ground in a male-dominated space. Over the decades, she proved again and again that she wasn't going anywhere, first with Vertical Hold in the 90s, and then as a solo artist when she gave us timeless hits like No More Rain and Wish I Didn't Miss You. Her voice had the kind of power and pain that could bring you to tears, because you could feel every note came from a real place. Albums like Black Diamond and Mahogany Soul weren't just music. They were stories of survival, heartbreak, and hope, and they earned her not just fame, but the love of millions. Angie wasn't just a singer. She was a mother, a grandmother, a fighter, and a pioneer. She worked with legends like Prince, Snoop Dogg, and Betty Wright, acted in films and Broadway shows, and still found time to support others battling diabetes after her own diagnosis in 1999. In 2024, just 1 year before her death, she was inducted into the Women's Songwriters Hall of Fame, proof that her work mattered deeply. And now she's gone, just like that. A bright light in soul music, taken too soon by a tragedy that none of us saw coming. But what she gave us, her songs, her story, her spirit, will stay with us forever. Angie Stone may be gone, but her voice will never be silent. Dr. Hazel Nell Dukes, a fearless civil rights icon and one of the most influential voices for justice in America, who passed away peacefully on March 1, 2025, at the age of 92, surrounded by her loved ones in her Harlem home. Hazel wasn't just a leader, she was a fighter, someone who stood on the front lines of civil rights for over 7 decades, refusing to let injustice go unchallenged. The final months of her life were quiet but deeply meaningful, as she continued to speak out and support young leaders even in her 90s. Her health had begun to slowly decline, and though she stayed strong and sharp in spirit, her body could no longer keep pace with the mission she had carried on her shoulders for so long. She left this world the same way she lived in it, courageously, with purpose, and surrounded by the very community she helped build. Born in Montgomery, Alabama, on March 17, 1932, she grew up just steps away from Rosa Parks' house, raised by parents who taught her the value of hard work and standing up for what's right. Her father was a Pullman porter who fought to form the first all-black railroad union, and that fighting spirit clearly ran in the family. Hazel's early dreams of teaching shifted after her move to New York in 1955, where she instead pursued a career in business and social work, earning her degree much later in life, but never slowing down. Her work with the Head Start program in the 1960s and later as the first black hire in the Nassau County Attorney's Office was just the beginning. She became known for being fearless, loud when she needed to be, and unapologetically honest. In the 1990s, she served as national president of the NAACP and remained president of the New York State NAACP Conference until her death, tirelessly pushing for fair housing, better education, voting rights, and healthcare access. But her story wasn't without pain. Hazel made mistakes too. including a legal issue in the late 90s involving financial misconduct, something she faced head-on, admitted to, and moved forward from. Through all of it, her heart stayed committed to helping others. She founded her own consulting firm, mentored countless activists, and continued to show up even when the world tried to silence her. Her passing has left a heavy silence in places where her voice once thundered. For many, especially those she mentored, this loss feels like losing a mother, a teacher, and a friend all at once. From plaques in Harlem to honors from Congress, she earned more recognition than most could ever dream of. But none of that compared to the respect and love she earned in the streets, schools, and neighborhoods where she did the real work. Hazel Dukes didn't just leave behind awards and speeches. She left behind a legacy built on sacrifice, struggle, and the deep belief that one person really can change the world. She is survived by her son Ronald and daughter-in-law Janet, and by the thousands whose lives she touched, fought for, and lifted up. The world feels different without her in it, but everything she stood for still lives on. Rest in power, Dr. Hazel Nell Dukes. You gave this world everything you had. Pamela Bach, an American actress known for her roles in shows like Baywatch and Sirens. But more than that, remembered as a kind-hearted soul whose final years were marked by quiet suffering and invisible pain. Pamela was found dead in her Hollywood Hills home on March 5, 2025, at the age of 61, with the cause confirmed as suicide from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. What makes this so hard to process is how unexpected it was. Just months before, she was full of joy, gushing about her new granddaughter, London, and sounding excited for the future. But behind her bright smile was a body slowly breaking down. Ever since a brutal motorcycle accident with her ex-husband David Hasselhoff back in 2003, Pamela had lived with serious injuries, a broken neck and back, crushed bones, and constant pain that only got worse as arthritis took over her body. She spent years quietly dealing with that pain, and even those closest to her, like her longtime friend and Rep. Terry Ahern, never saw signs that she was struggling emotionally. That's what makes it all the more heartbreaking. People who knew her say she was always the first to help, full of warmth and love, someone who lit up every room with her laugh and cared deeply about animals, her daughters, and her granddaughter. Born in Tulsa, Oklahoma, Pamela was the second of three sisters. Her mom was a model, and Pamela followed in those footsteps before heading to Los Angeles in 1985 to chase her dream. She met Hasselhoff on the set of Knight Rider, and they married in 1989, raising two daughters, Taylor and Haley. Her career included a recurring role on Sirens, appearances on The Young and the Restless, and even a stint on Celebrity Big Brother UK in 2011. But behind the fame was a woman dealing with a difficult marriage, a painful divorce, and a long, private battle with the emotional and physical fallout of a life filled with both love and loss. Her divorce from Hasselhoff was messy and stretched out for years, with accusations of abuse and deep wounds left behind. Despite all that, Pamela never stopped loving her family. She wasn't just an actress or David Hasselhoff's ex. She was a mother, a grandmother, and a woman who loved deeply, even when it hurt. Her death shocked everyone who knew her, because she seemed to be doing okay, and that's the tragedy. Sometimes the pain we can't see is the one that finally breaks us. Her daughters, her friends, and even fans across the world are now left wondering if there was more they could have done. Pamela's life was full of joy, pain, love, and heartbreak, and her final message to the world, posted on Instagram on New Year's Eve, was all about hope. She looked forward to 2025, to watching her granddaughter grow, to finding joy in the little things. But just 2 months later, she was gone. And now, what's left are memories of her kindness, her laughter, her strength, and the ache of losing someone who deserved peace after so many years of pain. Nita Lowey, a trailblazing public servant and former U.S. representative from New York, who passed away at the age of 87 after a quiet and courageous fight with metastatic breast cancer. She died peacefully on March 15, 2025, surrounded by her loving husband, children, and grandchildren at her home in Harrison, New York. In her final years, Nita dealt with the relentless grip of cancer with the same fire and strength she had always shown during her 32 years in Congress, where she fought hard for women, children, and families. Her final days were spent in the comfort of home, embraced by family, while battling a disease that had slowly spread through her body, taking a toll that even her legendary resilience couldn't hold off forever. Cancer had been growing in her body, silently, persistently, but she never let it define her. Instead, she kept going, kept caring, even when the pain got harder to hide. Her family said she faced it all with grace, never complaining, never stopping her quiet push for good. Born in the Bronx on July 5, 1937, Nita grew up in New York City and went on to graduate as valedictorian from the Bronx High School of Science before earning her degree from Mount Holyoke College. Her path into politics began with campaign work for Mario Cuomo and led to a 13-year post as an Assistant Secretary of State for New York. In 1988, she ran for Congress and won, going on to serve in the House for more than 3 decades, representing suburban New York communities with deep commitment and heart. She shattered barriers throughout her career, becoming the first woman to chair the powerful House Appropriations Committee and the first to lead the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. Over the years, she worked on vital issues like AIDS research, women's health, education, and foreign aid. She was tough, but kind, able to work with people across party lines, and always focused on helping those who needed it most. People respected her not just for what she did, but for who she was. Her life was full of achievement, but she never made it about herself. She believed deeply in Tikkun Olam, the Jewish value of trying to heal the world, and she lived by it every day. When she decided to retire in 2020, it wasn't because she lost her passion, it was just time. She knew when to step aside with dignity, just as she knew how to lead with purpose. Her death is not just a loss to her family and friends, but to all who believe in honest, decent leadership. The flags in New York flew at half-staff in her honor, but it's not the symbols that matter. It's the quiet power of the life she lived and the people she touched. Her story reminds us that real leadership isn't loud or showy. It's steady, thoughtful, and full of heart. And even though she's gone, the work she did, the changes she made, and the people she helped will carry her memory forward. Nita Lowey wasn't just a politician. She was a force for good. And the world is a little better because she was in it. Mia Love, a powerful voice, a trailblazer, and a woman who fought until her very last breath. Mia Love, born Ludmilla Bordeaux, was more than just a former U.S. representative from Utah. She was a symbol of hope and strength. She passed away on March 23, 2025, after a long, painful battle with glioblastoma, an aggressive form of brain cancer that she'd been fighting since 2022. Doctors had given her 10 to 15 months to live after her diagnosis, and despite a major surgery that removed most of the tumor and rounds of intense treatment, the cancer came back. For a while, it looked like things were improving. She even joined a clinical trial that gave her and her family some hope. But by March 2025, her daughter posted that the treatments had stopped working, and it was now about making her final days as peaceful as possible. In those last few weeks, surrounded by her husband and 3 children, Mia knew the end was near, and they did everything they could to keep her comfortable, to laugh, to pray, and to hold on to every second they had left. She died at just 49, leaving behind a legacy bigger than politics. Born in Brooklyn in 1975 to Haitian parents who fled the brutality of Haiti's secret police, Mia's life started with struggle. Her parents didn't speak English and had almost nothing when they arrived in the U.S. her birth. Just 25 days before a key immigration law expired, gave them the chance to stay in America legally. She grew up in Connecticut, studied musical theater at the University of Hartford, and worked jobs ranging from flight attendant to tech worker before jumping into public service. In Utah, she became the first Haitian American elected official in the state and later, the first Black Republican woman ever elected to Congress. She made headlines not just for her identity, but for her independent stance. She didn't blindly follow party lines, often challenging her own side, including Donald Trump, when she thought it was right. Her time in Congress was marked by tough debates, bold positions, and the constant fight to be heard in a room that rarely looked like her. After losing re-election in 2018, she didn't fade away. She became a commentator on CNN, a guest host on The View, and a respected speaker and writer. But behind all of this was a woman of deep faith, a devoted mom, and someone who deeply loved her family and her country. Her death is more than just the loss of a public figure. It's the loss of a woman who shattered ceilings and carried the weight of so many firsts on her shoulders. The fact that someone so full of life, so determined and fearless, was slowly taken by a disease that stripped her of everything is heartbreaking. Cancer didn't care that she was strong, it came anyway. And yet, even in those final days, Mia Love faced it the way she faced everything else, with grit, grace, and honesty. Her story isn't just one of politics, it's one of survival, courage, and the power of never giving up. Sean Barbara Allen, a beloved American actress whose gentle presence lit up screens throughout the 1970s, passed away on March 31, 2025, at the age of 78, after a heartbreaking and prolonged battle with Alzheimer's disease. She took her final breath in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, surrounded by peace, comfort, and her daughter Emily, who had spent more time with her in that last year than in the 35 before. Born on July 12, 1946, in Reading, Pennsylvania, she discovered her love for performing early and earned a scholarship to the Pasadena Playhouse, where she trained from 1964 to 1965. That decision changed the course of her life. She started her television journey in the early 70s and quickly became a familiar face in American households, appearing on iconic shows like The Waltons, Gunsmoke, Ironside, and The Rockford Files. Her role in the thriller You'll Like My Mother 1972 not only put her on the map, but also earned her a Golden Globe nomination and introduced her to Richard Thomas, with whom she'd share both screen time and a real-life romance. Allen was known for her emotional depth and subtle performances, especially in roles like Peggy Johns in Scream, Pretty Peggy, and Anne Morrow Lindbergh in the Lindbergh kidnapping case. Despite a successful run in film and TV, she stepped away from the spotlight after 1990 to focus on her family, creative writing, and activism. Behind the fame was a woman who stood firmly by her principles. She never crossed a picket line and strongly supported labor rights, volunteering for political campaigns and championing social justice. But it was Alzheimer's that slowly stole her light. Diagnosed in her later years, the disease took its toll quietly at first. The usual forgetfulness, the repeated questions, but it worsened over time. In her final months, she needed constant care. The vibrant woman who once commanded screens with nothing but a glance could no longer remember lines, people, or even herself. It was devastating, not just for her but for those who loved her. Her sister, author Meg Pakras, wrote a heart-wrenching goodbye, calling the loss too hard. Yet despite all she lost in those last years, she held on to laughter, especially with her grandson Arlo, who could still bring out her smile when nothing else could. Sean Barbara Allen wasn't just an actress. She was a fighter, a mother, a storyteller, and a soul full of love and conviction. Her death is a quiet but painful reminder of the cruel grip of Alzheimer's, a disease that takes away everything except the love that surrounds us. May she rest peacefully, forever remembered not just for the roles she played, but for the life she lived. Nancy B. Heffley, the beloved American stadium organist who filled Dodger Stadium with music and heart for nearly 3 decades, passed away on March 29, 2025, at the age of 89, leaving behind a legacy that still echoes in the stands she once filled with joy. Her death was confirmed by her son in a heartfelt Facebook post, saying, "We lost my mom today. She's in heaven with my dad, Bill, who passed in 2019. Fans were left stunned when the announcement came during a Dodgers game, followed by a moment of silence that wrapped the crowd in shared sorrow. It felt like a punch to the gut, as one broadcaster put it, because Nancy wasn't just a musician. She was part of the soul of the Dodgers family. In her final days, Nancy was no longer the central presence at the games she once defined. And though the team offered her a lifetime contract after she felt she no longer fit in, she eventually made peace with retiring. She had played the organ at Bellflower Baptist Church for over 55 years, where she met Bill, and brought that same warmth and faith to every note she played. She started learning piano at just 4 years old by mimicking her sister, and by 13 had talked her piano teacher into introducing her to the organ. Her love for music grew from the quiet corners of churches to the roaring cheers of packed stadiums. She took over for Helen Dell in 1988 after a standout audition, and instantly became a fan favorite, playing everything from rock tunes to heartfelt classics purely by feel, never using a setlist, always letting the moment guide her fingers. She had a library of over 2,000 songs in her head and played them like second nature. Dodgers fans loved her so much that, at one point, the team made it clear her job would be hers as long as she wanted it. But in 2015, during the final homestand, she chose to step away, and her retirement was marked with a touching on-field tribute. Nancy lived in Silver Springs, Nevada, commuting for each homestand, bringing along her husband, and staying in a second home during the season. She played through the championship run in 1988, marking moments like pitcher Oral Hershiser's innings with tunes like Master of the House, and never once tired of classics like Take Me Out to the Ballgame. Even though she left the spotlight years ago, her death reminds everyone of the quiet power she held, how one woman with an organ became as beloved as the biggest names in Dodgers history. Her life was full of love, music, and deep connection to the fans, and her passing is a reminder that sometimes the softest voices leave the deepest mark. Alice Tan Ridley, the soulful American gospel and R&B singer who turned subway stations into stages, passed away on March 25, 2025, in New York City at 72, leaving behind a legacy carved from resilience, raw talent, and late-blooming stardom. Known to many as the mother of actress Gabourey Sidibe, and to others simply as Tan, she rose from the underground, literally, to national attention when she stunned the judges and audiences on America's Got Talent at age 58 with her powerhouse voice. But her journey wasn't wrapped in glitter. For over 3 decades, she stood in the echoing corridors of New York's subway stations, pouring her heart out through music, not for fame, but because she believed that the music mattered. Singing became her full-time life after she left her teaching job, choosing instead a path where notes and lyrics could touch strangers passing by. She wasn't just singing for attention. She was singing because that was her world, her church, her truth. She once said the subway felt like a cathedral to her, and those platforms were where she shared her soul. Sadly, her family didn't reveal the exact cause of her death, only that she died in New York, the same city where she spent decades chasing dreams and lifting spirits. Her final years were quiet, away from the spotlight she briefly stepped into during her run on AGT. But she never stopped singing. Even after the TV lights faded, she went back to the underground, saying she missed it. That kind of love for music, the kind that doesn't need a stage, just people who listen, is rare. Born in Lumpkin, Georgia, in 1952, Alice was the 7th of 8 children in a family where music was more than sound, it was life. She moved to New York, earned her teaching license, and raised 2 children after marrying Ibnu Sidibe, a marriage that ended in divorce, but stayed respectful over time. Her daughter Gabourey found fame in Hollywood, but Alice had already been a star to so many New Yorkers. She worked at Harlem's Cotton Club, appeared on Showtime at the Apollo, and even performed with a full symphony orchestra. In 2016, she finally released her debut album Never Lost My Way, at 63, a title that speaks volumes. She never did lose her way. Her final days were quiet, no spotlight, no cameras, just the quiet end of a woman who had spent her life turning pain, faith, and love into music. Though she didn't get a flashy goodbye, her story stays with the people who heard her voice underground, those who saw her shine on TV, and the family and strangers alike who felt something real when she sang. Today, we remember Joan Brown Campbell, a powerful voice for peace, justice, and unity who passed away on March 29, 2025, at the age of 93, after a long battle with dementia. Her final days were spent in an assisted living facility in Chagrin Falls, Ohio, where her health slowly faded. her once bright mind clouded by the cruel effects of a disease that gradually took away her memories and strength. It was a quiet, heartbreaking end for a woman whose life was anything but quiet. Joan was a Christian minister, a fearless ecumenical leader, and a trailblazer for women in faith, known not just for her sermons, but for her unshakable courage. She was the first ordained woman to become General Secretary of the National Council of Churches in the United States and later led both the U.S. Office of the World Council of Churches and the Religion Department at the Chautauqua Institution, each time becoming the first woman to take the role. Born in Youngstown, Ohio, in 1931, Joan grew up in a world that didn't expect women to lead churches or take center stage in major religious dialogues. But she pushed forward, earning degrees from the University of Michigan, raising 3 children, and facing the collapse of her marriage, partly because of her bold civil rights stance and support for Martin Luther King Jr. She didn't back down. She invited King to speak at her church during times when that could destroy reputations, yet she stood tall. She stood beside global icons like Pope John Paul II and Desmond Tutu, led dialogues at the United Nations, and even helped broker sensitive talks between Fidel Castro and U.S. President Bill Clinton to return a young Cuban boy, Elian Gonzalez, to his country. She wrote books, shared prayers, and gave her life to the idea that people of all faiths and backgrounds could work together. She spent her later years at Chautauqua, guiding religious thought and reflection, and even after stepping down, her influence continued. Her legacy includes being honored in the Ohio Women's Hall of Fame and the Civil Rights Hall of Fame, as well as receiving awards like the Walter Cronkite Faith and Freedom Award. But more than the titles, Joan Brown Campbell will be remembered for her spirit, the calm, determined voice in chaos, the quiet strength in rooms full of power, the woman who broke barriers by simply showing up and refusing to sit down. Her death is a loss not just to religion, but to the world. And while her memory may have faded in her final days, the impact she made will never be forgotten. Today, we remember Jean Marsh, a beloved English actress and writer whose quiet strength, remarkable talent, and unforgettable performances left a deep mark on British television. She passed away on April 13, 2025, at the age of 90, after a long battle with dementia. Her final years were marked by silence, confusion, and a slow fading of the very memories and creative energy that once lit up the screen. It's painful to imagine someone so sharp, so expressive, spending her last days unable to fully connect with the world around her. In 2011, Jean suffered a stroke and a minor heart attack, which made her weak and distant from the spotlight she helped create. These health issues slowly wore her down, and although she returned briefly to reprise her iconic role as Rose Buck in the revival of Upstairs, Downstairs, it was clear that her time in front of the camera was coming to an end. Her last public appearances were few, and eventually, she quietly retreated into her London home, where she spent her remaining years cared for, but mostly away from the world that once celebrated her so loudly. Born on July 1, 1934, in Stoke Newington, London, Jean had a difficult childhood. She was partly paralyzed as a child and later suffered from Bell's palsy, but her parents enrolled her in a dance school, hoping movement would help her recover. It did more than that. It sparked a love for performance that would shape the rest of her life. She trained in ballet, acting, and mime, and eventually made her mark on both sides of the Atlantic with her grace and depth. Jean starred in major films like Cleopatra, Frenzy, Willow, and Return to Oz, and made appearances in iconic shows such as Doctor Who, where she played not one, but 3 memorable roles. But she will always be best known for Upstairs, Downstairs, which she co-created with Eileen Atkins. That show changed television forever, telling stories of class, struggle, and humanity through the eyes of servants and masters alike. Her role as Rose Buck, strong, loyal, deeply human, won her an Emmy in 1975 and made her a household name. Jean's writing, her acting, and her quiet fight to bring working-class voices to the screen will never be forgotten. But it's the ending that breaks your heart. Dementia didn't just take her life, it took her memories, her words, her spark. And yet, even in that silence, her legacy speaks. Jean Marsh wasn't just an actress. She was a storyteller, a pioneer, and a woman who turned pain into art. She deserved more time, more comfort. But even in her final moments, she left behind a body of work that speaks louder than words. Elaine Wynn, the iconic American businesswoman and philanthropist, who passed away on April 14, 2025, at the age of 82, after a short illness and complications from heart failure, leaving behind a legacy that helped shape modern Las Vegas and uplift countless lives. Elaine died peacefully at her home in Los Angeles, but those close to her say her last days were quiet and surrounded by family, with her health rapidly declining in the final week. It was a sudden and heartbreaking loss for those who knew her personally and those who admired her work from afar. Known as the Queen of Las Vegas, Elaine co-founded Mirage Resorts and Wynn Resorts alongside her former husband Steve Wynn, helping turn the Las Vegas Strip into a global destination for luxury and entertainment. But behind the glittering casinos and billion-dollar resorts was a woman who dedicated her life to children's education, the arts, and her community. Born in New York City in 1942 to a modest Jewish family and raised in Miami Beach, she was always driven, majoring in political science at George Washington University, where she met Steve on a blind date and married him in 1963. Elaine's life wasn't just about wealth, though she was worth nearly $2 billion when she died, but about power used with purpose. She became the largest shareholder in Wynn Resorts and led efforts to clean up the company's image after Steve was accused of sexual misconduct in 2018, reclaiming her voice and her stake in the business. But it was her final years that showed just how strong she was. Despite personal heartbreaks, including a public divorce and even a terrifying episode when her daughter Kevin was kidnapped in 1993, Elaine never stopped fighting for what she believed in. She championed education reform, sat on the Nevada State Board of Education, and pushed tirelessly for programs that kept at-risk kids in school. She donated millions to the University of Nevada, helped launch scholarships, and left her mark on countless arts institutions. Even in her final months, she was being honored for her achievements, set to be inducted into the Nevada Business Hall of Fame. Her sudden passing hit hard not just because of who she was, but because of how deeply she cared about people, about the future, about leaving things better than she found them. Today, we lost someone who meant so much to country music, gospel, and comedy. Lulu Roman, whose real name was Bertha Louise Habel, passed away on April 23, 2025, at the age of 78, from heart failure at her son's home in Bellingham, Washington. Her final days were quiet and spent with her son Damon, who she had moved in with just 7 months before. It's sad to think that someone who brought laughter to millions spent her last moments battling a failing heart, far from the bright lights of the stage. Lulu was born in 1946 in a Texas home for unwed mothers, already facing health problems from birth due to a thyroid condition. Because of her health and weight, she was never adopted and ended up in an orphanage, a rough start that left deep scars. In school, she was teased badly and eventually turned to drugs and comedy to cope. She began performing in Dallas nightclubs as the world's biggest go-go dancer, and it was there that country music legend Buck Owens discovered her sharp sense of humor. He brought her to the producers of Hee Haw, where she became a fan favorite for her fast wit and huge personality. But behind the scenes, Lulu was spiraling. She got hooked on drugs, was arrested for possession, and sentenced to 4 years in prison. That could have been the end of her story. But in 1973, she found faith, cleaned herself up, and made a comeback. She wasn't just back on Hee Haw. This time, she was singing, pouring her heart into gospel music that spoke to anyone who'd ever been broken. She released more than a dozen albums, got nominated for a Grammy, and even sang with legends like Dolly Parton and George Jones. She won a Dove Award, was inducted into the Country Gospel Music Hall of Fame, and never stopped performing, blending comedy, truth, and faith in a way that touched people deeply. She was also a mom to 2 sons, Damon and Justin, though heartbreak followed her again when Justin died in 2017. In her last years, She wrote a book about her life, called This Is My Story, This Is My Song, and gave her time to causes that helped kids and others fighting addiction, because she knew what that road was like. Her story is not just about fame or talent, but about pain, survival, and starting over. She made people laugh, made them cry, and gave them hope, even when her own life was full of battles. Lulu Roman lived a life that was far from easy, but she kept getting back up, kept sharing her voice, and left behind a legacy full of love, honesty, and grace. Today, we remember Lar Park Lincoln, a talented American actress who left us on April 22, 2025, after a brave and long battle with breast cancer. Lar was best known for her unforgettable role as Tina Shepard in the 1988 horror film Friday, the 13th Part 7, The New Blood, where she played a telekinetic woman fighting the iconic killer Jason Voorhees, a role that made her a beloved figure in horror circles. She also had a strong presence on television, especially for her role as Linda Fairgate in the popular CBS soap Knots Landing, which she played for several years, captivating audiences with her complex character. Born Lori Jill Park on May 12, 1961, in Dallas, Texas, Lar began acting in the mid-1980s and quickly made a name for herself through films like Children of the Night and guest appearances on shows like Hunter and Freddy's Nightmares. Her career spanned over 45 years, with a mix of horror, drama, and guest roles, as well as a deep dedication to mentoring young actors through her own Actors Audition studios in Dallas. Despite her success, Lar's life was marked by painful personal loss, including the death of her husband Michael in 1995, and battles with cancer starting in 2008 that led to many surgeries over the years. Her final days were filled with courage and the love of her family, including her 2 children and grandchildren. Though the cancer slowly took its toll, Lar stayed strong and continued to inspire through her work and teaching until the very end. She faced her illness quietly, away from the spotlight, but her impact on Hollywood and the people she helped will be remembered forever. Lar's journey was not just about fame, but about resilience, kindness, and the passion she had for acting and coaching others to follow their dreams without losing themselves. Losing her feels like losing a piece of the heart of the entertainment world, especially for those who grew up watching her iconic performances or learned from her experience. Today, as we say goodbye to Lar Park Lincoln, we honor her memory, not just as the scream queen or soap star, but as a fighter, a mother, a teacher, and a beloved friend. Her story reminds us how fragile life is and how important it is to cherish every moment, especially when facing something as devastating as cancer. She leaves behind a legacy of courage and creativity that will continue to shine through the generations she touched. Today, we remember the heart-wrenching loss of Bianca Castro Arabeo, better known as Jiggly Caliente, a Filipino-American transgender drag queen, singer, and actress who passed away far too soon on April 27, 2025, at just 44 years old. Jiggly's final days were filled with pain and struggle after a serious infection led to the surgical removal of her right leg on April 24th. Sadly, her body couldn't recover from the trauma, and she died in the hospital 3 days later. Her passing sent shockwaves through the drag and LGBTQ+ community, with countless fans and fellow performers mourning the loss of someone who brought so much color and power to the world. She wasn't just a performer, she was a fighter, someone who battled hate, rejection, and personal demons to become a beloved public figure. Born in the Philippines and raised in Queens, New York, Jiggly's early life was marked by hardship. She was bullied as a child, even expelled from school for standing up to her bullies, and later struggled to find her place in a world that constantly tried to silence her. After trying to study art, she found her true voice in drag, where she transformed pain into strength and performance into purpose. She got her start in drag on a dare, but it quickly became her passion. She lit up the stage on RuPaul's Drag Race Season 4 and returned with more grace and confidence in All Stars Season 6. She later became a judge on Drag Race Philippines and acted in the hit series Pose, where her presence brought joy to so many. But behind the glitter, there was a real person, Someone who once worked in the back rooms of clubs just to survive. Someone who stood proudly in her truth when she came out as transgender in 2016. And someone who never stopped fighting for others in her community. She used her voice to speak up for trans rights and inspired people all over the world. Her death hit hard not just because she was a star, but because she was real. She laughed loud, lived boldly, and lifted others even when she was hurting. Fans and friends flooded social media with tributes, remembering her humor, heart, and how she made them feel seen. Michelle Visage said her laughter never stopped, and co-stars from Pose and Drag Race shared their grief openly. Even in death, her legacy lives on. But it hurts knowing how much pain she endured at the end. The infection that took her leg and eventually her life was cruel. And it reminds us of how fragile life really is. Jiggly's story isn't just about drag or fame. It's about strength, survival, and how even the brightest lights can be taken from us too soon. She gave everything she had to the world, and the world is better because of her. Rest in peace, Jiggly, you mattered, and you will never be forgotten. Today, we remember the long and bittersweet life of Cora Sue Collins, a once beloved child actress from the golden era of Hollywood who passed away on April 27, 2025, at the age of 98 from complications following a stroke, peacefully at her home in Beverly Hills. Her final days were quiet and private. Just as much of her life became after walking away from the spotlight at just 18 years old. Born April 19, 1927, in Beckley, West Virginia, Cora was pushed into acting by her ambitious mother, and by the time she was only 5, she had already made her debut in The Unexpected Father 1932. Over the next decade, she would go on to appear in 47 films, often cast as the sweet daughter or the childhood version of glamorous leads like Greta Garbo and Claudette Colbert. She was chosen by Garbo herself to play her younger self in Queen Christina 1933, and the two kept in touch until Garbo's death. Cora was never meant to be just another face in the crowd. She could cry on cue, charm any director, and hold her own next to Hollywood legends. But despite the smiling faces and studio lights, her experience behind the scenes was far from innocent. At 15, she was offered a major role by a much older screenwriter she trusted, but only in exchange for something no child should ever be asked for. When she said no and reported it to MGM boss Louis B. Mayer, she was met with cold silence. That moment broke something in her. Not her spirit, but her desire to stay in an industry that didn't protect her. She left films in 1945, turning her back on fame and instead choosing a life of peace, love, and family. She later said that leaving Hollywood was the best decision she ever made. Cora studied architecture, married 3 times, lived in Mexico for a while, raised children, and enjoyed a quiet life as Susie Nace in Phoenix, Arizona. Her story is one of beauty and pain, a childhood filled with bright lights, famous faces, and silent trauma. And though she never returned to the screen, her legacy never faded. From the curly-haired little girl on screen to the strong woman who chose to live on her own terms, Cora Sue Collins was more than just a child star. She was a survivor of an industry that too often looked the other way. Her death marks the end of an era, but her story deserves to be remembered not just for the roles she played, but for the strength it took to walk away from it all. Priscilla Marie Pointer, an American actress whose name may not have always been in the headlines, but whose quiet strength and years of dedication left a lasting mark on both stage and screen. Priscilla passed away peacefully from natural causes on April 28, 2025, at the age of 100, at an assisted living facility in Ridgefield, Connecticut. Her death was confirmed by her daughter, the actress Amy Irving, and though it came gently, as life slowly faded away after a full century, it still carries a deep sense of loss. In her final days, Priscilla had grown weaker with age, spending her last moments surrounded by care and comfort, far from the spotlights that once lit her path. Living to see 100 is a rare milestone, and while she may have stepped back from public life, her long years were filled with art, family, and purpose. Born in New York City in 1924 to creative parents, Her mother was a sculptor and illustrator, her father an artist. Priscilla grew up in a household shaped by expression and creativity. She started in theater in the 1940s, gracing Broadway and performing in classics like A Streetcar Named Desire and The Country Wife, often working alongside her husband, Jules Irving, who she married in 1947 and remained with until his death in 1979. She later remarried Robert Simmons, and her family ties would grow to include names like Steven Spielberg and Bruno Barreto through her daughter Amy. But Priscilla was never just someone's mother. She carved her own place in Hollywood, especially through the 1970s and 1980s. She became known for playing strong, often stern women, mothers, teachers, judges, characters with depth and quiet power. She appeared in over 40 episodes of the hit show Dallas as Rebecca Barnes Wentworth, and shared the screen with her daughter Amy in several films, including Carrie, Honeysuckle Rose, and Carried Away. She also featured in cult classics like A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Blue Velvet, and Twilight Zone, the movie. Her performances weren't about fame. They were about craft, about showing up and doing the work, whether in a Broadway theater or on a TV soundstage. What makes her story so moving is how she paused her rising career to raise her children, only to return and build something even stronger in her 40s and beyond. Priscilla's journey was never loud, but it was filled with meaning. She gave everything she had to her roles, to her family, to the art she loved. Her passing might have been quiet, but the life she lived, full of purpose, talent, and quiet perseverance, deserves to be remembered with deep respect. She was more than just a character actress. She was a woman who lived fully, gave generously, and stayed true to her path until the very end. Today, we remember the beautiful life and heartbreaking passing of Tina Elg, a Finnish-American actress and dancer whose grace, talent, and charm once lit up the golden screens of Hollywood and the grand stages of Broadway, but whose final days were spent quietly in a nursing home in Helsinki, far from the bright lights she once dazzled under. Tina died on May 15, 2025, at the age of 95, after a long life filled with both triumph and solitude. Though the official cause of death has not been publicly detailed, it is clear that age and its natural toll had slowly dimmed the once vibrant flame of this legendary performer. Her later years were spent mostly away from the spotlight, living a quieter life in Finland after decades in New York City. In those last days, she was surrounded by fading memories of applause and stages, living out her final moments in the country where it all began. Born on March 9, 1930, in Helsinki, Tina Elizabeth Elg was raised in Turku by artistic parents, a pianist father, and a Russian-born mother, who nurtured her early interest in music and dance. Her childhood was shaped by the turmoil of war as her family was forced to evacuate during the Finnish-Soviet conflicts. Even in those uncertain times, Tina held on to her dream of performing. She trained as a ballerina and joined the Finnish National Ballet at a young age, later moving to London and Paris, where her international career took root. Her life changed forever when she was discovered by American producer Edwin H. Knopf and signed to a 7-year contract by MGM in the 1950s. Hollywood quickly embraced her elegance, and in 1957, she starred alongside Gene Kelly in Les Girls, a role that won her a Golden Globe for Best Actress in a musical/comedy, which she shared with co-star Kay Kendall. She had already won a Golden Globe the previous year for Female Foreign Newcomer and was hailed as one of the most promising new faces in cinema. Her rise was swift, with roles in The Prodigal, Gabby, and The 39 Steps cementing her place in film history. But after a few strong years, Hollywood began to turn its gaze elsewhere, and Tina turned to the stage, where she found lasting success. Her theater career included 7 Broadway appearances, with a Tony nomination for Where's Charlie and standout performances in 9, A Little Night Music, and Cabaret. She even made her mark in soap operas, with memorable roles in One Life to Live and Guiding Light, including a dramatic death scene that fans still remember. Offstage, Tina was a devoted mother to her son Raul, a jazz guitarist, and was married twice, most recently to sociology professor Rocco Caporali, until his death in 2008. In 2004, She was honored with the Order of the Lion of Finland, a final salute from the country that had always claimed her as one of its own. Though she spent many of her later years in relative quiet, her impact never faded. The passing of Tina Elg marks the end of an era, a time when elegance, poise, and artistry defined stardom. She lived a life of beauty and strength, rising from the shadows of war to the glitz of Hollywood, and eventually to the silence of a nursing home where the curtain finally fell. Her legacy remains not just in the awards and roles, but in the quiet power of a woman who kept dancing through every chapter of life, right until the very end. Joan O'Brien, the American actress and singer who passed away on May 5, 2025, at the age of 89 after a long and heartbreaking battle with Alzheimer's disease, a condition that slowly took her memories, her voice, and eventually her life. Her final days were quiet, filled with fading thoughts of a vibrant past, as her family stood by helplessly, watching her slip further into silence. Joan had once been full of energy and talent, a bright face on television screens in the 1950s and 60s, known not just for her looks but for her unmistakable voice and magnetic presence. She acted alongside icons like Cary Grant, John Wayne, Jerry Lewis, and Elvis Presley. And while the world celebrated her beauty and charm, behind the scenes, she was a hardworking, passionate artist who started out as a teenage singer on Hometown Jamboree before joining The Bob Crosby Show and eventually landing major film roles. Born on Valentine's Day in 1936 in Cambridge, Massachusetts, Joan's life took a turn when her family moved to California and enrolled her in dance classes at age 8. Her talent blossomed quickly. She became the girl everyone noticed, not just for her roles as a nurse in several films, but for the way she lit up the screen, especially in classics like Operation Petticoat and It Happened at the World's Fair, where she starred opposite Elvis Presley, sparking rumors of a real-life romance with the king himself. But Joan's life wasn't just glitter and lights. In 1965, during a rough chapter marked by personal struggles, she was hospitalized after reportedly attempting suicide at the home of actor Robert Vaughn. Though she survived, that moment marked a slow fade from the spotlight. She turned to music again, performing with the Harry James Band, and eventually left show business completely to raise her children and later found stability in the corporate world as an executive with the Hilton hotel chain. Joan married 5 times, and while none of her first 4 marriages lasted, she finally found peace with her 5th husband, Malcolm Campbell, until his passing in 2004. The years that followed were quieter, and as Alzheimer's took over, the vibrant woman once loved by millions slowly disappeared, piece by piece. It's hard to imagine that someone who once made Elvis laugh and turned heads in every room she entered would spend her last years locked in a world she couldn't understand. Her daughter Melissa confirmed her passing, choosing not to share many details, perhaps because words fall short when trying to explain the loss of someone who meant so much. Joan O'Brien gave us beautiful music, unforgettable movie moments, and a glimpse into Hollywood's golden age. But in the end, like so many, she was taken by an illness that doesn't care who you are or what you've done. Today, we honor her not just for the roles she played, but for the life she lived, the struggles she faced, and the quiet, painful way she left this world. Kathleen Hughes, the beautiful blonde screen siren of the 1950s, who tragically passed away on May 19, 2025, at the age of 96, closing the curtain on a long, unforgettable life that began in Hollywood and ended with a quiet goodbye, surrounded by the memories of a time when she lit up the big screen. Born Elizabeth Margaret von Gherkin on November 14, 1928, Kathleen lived nearly a century, but the final years were slower, quieter, and more private, especially after the death of her beloved husband, producer Stanley Rubin, in 2014. Despite her bright spirit and good health for most of her life, age finally caught up with her, and though no public cause was given, those close to her described a peaceful passing due to natural causes. Her final days were marked by calm, comfort, and a gentle fading away in the city where her life and dreams first began, Hollywood. Kathleen had been a vibrant soul with sharp wit and a contagious laugh, But time, as always, had its way. Her voice became softer, her movements slower, but her memories remained vivid. And those who loved her say she never lost that sparkle in her eyes when she talked about her days on set. She was discovered in 1948 while performing in a little theater production, and it wasn't long before 20th Century Fox signed her to a 7-year contract. Kathleen didn't just look like a star, she acted like one too. Though her birth name was considered too long for studio lights, she embraced the name Kathleen Hughes, a blend of her mother's and uncle's names, and stepped into fame with poise. She became known for her roles in cult classics like It Came from Outer Space, where her iconic scream would live on for decades, appearing on birthday cards, movie posters, and even food ads. She gave Rock Hudson his first on-screen kiss, played scheming women in film noires like The Glass Web, and wasn't afraid to embrace the bad girl roles that made her unforgettable. Critics called her a dainty dish of poison, and she loved every minute of it. Off-screen, Kathleen was deeply devoted to her family, marrying Stanley Rubin in 1954 and raising 4 children with him. Unlike many Hollywood couples, theirs was a love story that endured for nearly 6 decades. Later in life, she moved more into television, appearing in shows like Perry Mason, I Dream of Jeannie, and MASH, and even made her last appearance in 2018. She was also a generous soul, donating to children's hospitals, Alzheimer's research, and UCLA's film school, giving back to the city that made her a star. But beneath all the fame and legacy, Kathleen Hughes was a woman who loved acting, loved laughing, and loved being part of something bigger than herself. Her death marks the end of a Hollywood era, the kind filled with studio lights, black and white glamour, and women who knew how to hold their own in a man's world. She never complained about the sexism she faced, but always stood her ground, remembering both the good and the hard with honesty and grace. And though she's gone, the image of her wide-eyed scream will live forever, a symbol of a time, a talent, and a woman who made her mark and never looked back. Margot Friedlander, a Holocaust survivor, author, and public speaker, who tragically passed away on May 9, 2025, in Berlin at the age of 103. Her death marked the end of a life shaped by unimaginable pain, survival, and resilience. In her final days, Margot was still actively sharing her story, warning younger generations about the dangers of hate and silence. She had survived one of the darkest times in human history, losing her entire family to the horrors of Auschwitz, living in hiding for over a year in Nazi Berlin, and then enduring the brutal conditions of their Seenstadt concentration camp. She was caught in 1944 after being betrayed by fellow Jews forced into working for the Nazis, and admitted her identity while being taken to a police station. She survived their Seenstadt only because she arrived shortly before the war ended. She once said that when the Red Cross came, no one even noticed. They were too broken to feel joy. Margot was born in Berlin in 1921 and lived a quiet childhood, dreaming of becoming a fashion designer. But everything changed when the Nazis came to power. Her father fled. Her mother tried and failed to leave, and her younger brother Ralph was arrested by the Gestapo. Her mother turned herself in to be with him, and both were murdered in Auschwitz. Before disappearing, her mother left Margot a message: "Try to make your life." These words became the heart of Margot's journey. She dyed her hair red, wore a Christian cross, and had her nose altered by a doctor to survive in hiding. 16 brave Germans risked their lives to shelter her until her capture. After the war, she met her future husband Adolf in the camp, and they married just weeks after liberation, not out of romance, but out of shared trauma and the need to feel human again. In 1946, they moved to the U.S., settling in Queens, New York. She stayed silent about her past for decades, never speaking of what happened until after her husband's death in 1997. Then, slowly, she began to write. Her memories poured out in a memoir titled "Try to Make Your Life," and later she returned to Berlin, where she felt strangely at home. Despite her past, she chose to live again in the city that once turned its back on her, to speak in schools, to warn young people about the cost of indifference. She stood for peace, memory, and truth. She never forgot that while many looked away, some chose to help. She spent her final years telling her story not for herself, but for others. In 2023, she opened the Margot Friedlander Foundation to fight hate and promote democracy. She even graced the cover of German Vogue in 2024, still raising her voice against anti-Semitism. Her legacy is more than survival, it's a message passed from a mother to a daughter, and from that daughter to the world. Try to make your life. And she did. Ruth Bootsy, the unforgettable American actress and comedian who passed away on May 1, 2025, at the age of 88, after a long and painful battle with Alzheimer's disease, dying peacefully in her sleep while in hospice care at her Texas ranch. Her final years were quiet and heartbreaking. After being diagnosed with Alzheimer's over a decade ago, her health slowly declined, and in 2022, her husband revealed she had become bedridden after suffering several strokes. Once full of life and laughter, she spent her last days surrounded by loved ones, far from the spotlight she had once lit up with her electric presence. Ruth was best known for her iconic role as the frumpy and fierce Gladys Ormsby on the hit TV show Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In, where her hilarious purse-wielding character became a household name. But her career was so much more than just one role. She was a woman of incredible talent and range, with a face made for comedy, a voice that brought life to cartoons, and a spirit that gave heart to every performance. Born on July 24, 1936, in Westerly, Rhode Island, Ruth was raised in Wequatequock, Connecticut, where her father was a stone sculptor and monument maker. From her high school days as head cheerleader to graduating with honors from the Pasadena Playhouse, alongside future legends like Dustin Hoffman and Gene Hackman, Ruth showed promise early on. She hit the ground running, working in musical revues and performing with stars like Dom DeLuise and Barbra Streisand, and later gained national attention on The Gary Moore Show. Her unforgettable Gladys, with a hairnet not smack in the middle of her forehead and a mean handbag swing, became the face of awkward, lonely women from an older generation, both hilariously out of place and heartbreakingly real in the face of a changing world. Behind the characters, Ruth was also a generous soul, devoting time and money to children's hospitals, animal shelters, and art charities. She also had a love for classic cars, sharing a passion with her husband Kent Perkins, with whom she lived a peaceful life on a 600-acre ranch. Even after leaving the spotlight, she continued to bring joy to others through her voice work on Sesame Street, her painting, and her tireless charity efforts. But Alzheimer's took all that away, piece by piece, her memory, her voice, her independence, until there was nothing left but the love people held for her and the memories of the joy she gave. Ruth Bootsy didn't just make people laugh, she made them feel seen. And while her final chapter was marked by quiet suffering, the legacy she leaves behind is filled with laughter, kindness, and the unforgettable image of a little lady in brown, standing her ground with a purse full of courage. Jill Sobule, a fearless and groundbreaking American singer-songwriter whose life was tragically cut short at the age of 66 when she died in a devastating house fire in Woodbury, Minnesota on May 1, 2025. Firefighters rushed to the scene around 5:30 a.m. after reports of a burning home, only to find her lifeless body inside. Jill had been staying with friends while preparing to perform songs from her deeply personal one-woman musical, FCK 7th Grade, a show about growing up feeling like an outsider, something she knew all too well. The cause of the fire is still under investigation, leaving fans and loved ones with heartbreak and unanswered questions. Her sudden death shook the music world, especially because she had just come off tour and was full of energy, plans, and purpose. Best known for her 1995 hit, I Kissed a Girl, a bold, honest song that spoke openly about same-sex attraction during a time when it wasn't easy or accepted. And for Supermodel, from the cult favorite film Clueless, Jill gave a voice to the weird, the different, and the misunderstood. Her music was raw and real, often touching on issues like mental health, queer identity, body image, and politics, always delivered with an emotional honesty and playful tone that made her both relatable and deeply respected. Born on January 16, 1959, in Denver, Colorado, She was raised in a secular Jewish home by a veterinarian father and a musician mother. Even as a young girl attending a Catholic school where she was the only Jewish student, Jill found solace in music, strumming her guitar during Mass. Her love for music only grew stronger after spending a year in Spain during college, where she performed in public for the first time, eventually dropping out to chase her dream full-time. Her 1995 self-titled album shot her into the spotlight, but Jill never chased fame, she chased truth. Her career spanned 12 albums, collaborations with countless artists, music for TV shows like Unfabulous, and advocacy work for causes she cared deeply about, including LGBTQ+ rights and reproductive freedom. Friends say she was kind, hilarious, and always present, whether on stage or in conversation. Jill Sabiol wasn't just a singer, she was a storyteller, a fighter, and someone who made people feel seen. Her sudden and shocking death leaves a hole in the hearts of many, especially because she was still creating, still pushing boundaries, and still reaching people in the most personal way possible through her music. As we mourn her loss, we hold tight to the songs she gave us, the stories she told, and the courage she inspired in anyone who ever felt like they didn't fit in. Valerie Mahaffey, a gifted American actress whose gentle spirit and brilliant performances left a quiet but powerful mark on television, film, and theater. She tragically passed away on May 30, 2025, at the age of 71, after a private and painful battle with cancer. Valerie died in Los Angeles, with her husband, actor Joseph Kell, by her side, and the news of her death broke hearts across the entertainment world. Her final months were spent away from the public eye, quietly fighting an illness that slowly took her strength, while her family stood close, cherishing their last moments with the woman who meant the world to them. Her daughter wrote, "Cancer sucks. I'll look for you in all the fun moments of life." A simple but heartbreaking sentence that speaks volumes. Valerie's loss is felt deeply not just because of her talent, but because of who she was, a kind, humble soul who never chased fame yet always stood out. Born on June 16, 1953, in Sumatra, Indonesia, to a Canadian mother and American father, Valerie had a childhood marked by travel and change, living in Nigeria, England, and finally settling in Texas. She graduated from Austin High School and later earned her Bachelor of Fine Arts from the University of Texas, before stepping into the world of acting, where her real journey began. She first gained recognition on the soap opera The Doctors in the late 70s, earning a Daytime Emmy nomination. But it was her role as Eve in Northern Exposure that truly made her unforgettable. Her portrayal of a lovable hypochondriac won her the Primetime Emmy in 1992. Valerie had a unique ability to play characters who were quirky, intense, or quietly powerful, and she did so on hit shows like Desperate Housewives, Wings, Young Sheldon, Dead to Me, and Big Sky. Her film work included roles in Seabiscuit, Sully, French Exit, and more, with her role opposite Michelle Pfeiffer in French Exit earning her critical praise and an Independent Spirit Award nomination. Off-screen, she was a devoted mother and wife, a theater lover with 2 Obie Awards, and someone deeply respected by her peers for her range, her warmth, and her professionalism. She made people laugh, cry, and feel seen. Valerie wasn't just another face on screen. She was one of those rare actors who never needed the spotlight to shine. In the end, it wasn't just cancer that took her. It was time, and the heartbreaking reality that even the brightest stars eventually go quiet. Valerie Mahaffey's legacy lives on in every scene she touched and in the hearts of those who loved her. And now, as we say goodbye, we hold on to her laughter, her voice, and the way she made the world feel just a little more full of life. Today, we remember Renee Victor, the unforgettable American actress and voice artist, who passed away at the age of 86 on May 30, 2025, at her home in Sherman Oaks, California, after a difficult battle with lymphoma. Her final days were spent quietly surrounded by her family, as her health steadily declined in the face of this relentless illness. Even as the cancer slowly took her strength, she remained filled with grace and love, her daughters Raquel and Margot by her side until the end. Best known for her hilarious and sharp-tongued portrayal of Lupita in the hit TV series. Weeds, Renee also left a lasting mark on the world as the fierce and protective abuelita in Disney Pixar's beloved film Coca. It's heartbreaking to think that the voice behind one of the most cherished grandmothers in modern animation is now gone forever. Her death comes as a deep loss not only to her family, but to generations of fans who grew up hearing her voice and watching her talent come alive on screen. Born on July 25, 1938, in San Antonio, Texas, Renee was raised in a traditional Catholic home, where she excelled in academics and shined as a young performer. By the age of 10, she had already graced the stage, dancing in a local opera production of Carmen, a moment that would set the tone for a lifelong career in the arts. Renee began professionally as a singer and dancer in Las Vegas, eventually traveling the world with her husband as the duo Ray and Renee, performing from Australia to Latin America and earning the nickname, the Latin Sonny and Cher. Her success on stage naturally transitioned to television and film, where she took on roles alongside legends like Robert Duvall and Scarlett Johansson. In The Apostle, Assassination Tango, and A Night in Old Mexico, she held her own, never once overshadowed by even the biggest stars. She won hearts in independent cinema too, winning Best Actress at the Napa Valley Film Festival for her role in Libertad. Her performance in Paranormal Activity, The Marked Ones, was so powerful that producers rewrote the script just to keep her character alive. That's the kind of effect Renee had. Audiences simply didn't want to let her go. She also lit up the small screen in shows like Dead to Me, Snowpiercer, Vita, and All Rise. And her comedy timing in Tyler Perry's House of Pain showed just how wide her range was. And while many admired her on-screen charisma, Renee's voice work was equally remarkable. Whether it was voicing characters in major video games like Skyrim, or giving life to animated roles in films like Coca, her voice had a warmth and strength that made people feel like she was speaking directly to them. Beyond the camera, she lived a full, colorful life. She was a dancer, choreographer, singer, cook, radio host, interpreter, and so much more. She was never afraid to try new things and stayed deeply involved in her community, her culture, and the arts. Renee wasn't just a performer. She was a proud mother, a passionate artist, and a woman who embraced her heritage and turned it into something powerful and beautiful for the world to see. Her death leaves behind a silence that cannot be filled, but her legacy will live on through her unforgettable performances, her voice that brought so many stories to life, and the hearts of everyone she touched. Loretta Swit, the beloved American television actress who passed away on May 30, 2025, at the age of 87, quietly at her home in Manhattan. Her publicist confirmed the sad news, but the pain of losing someone so familiar, so loved, feels anything but quiet. Most of the world knew her as Major Margaret "Hot Lips" Houlihan from the legendary TV show MASH, where she brought strength, grace, and vulnerability to a role that started out as the target of sexist jokes and evolved into a powerful, respected character thanks to Loretta's fierce commitment and spirit. For over a decade, she was the only leading woman on a male-dominated set, yet she stood tall, made her voice heard, and won 2 Emmy Awards for her performance. But in her final days, the spotlight faded, and Loretta faced the slow but natural decline of age. There was no high drama, no scandal, just the gentle winding down of a long, remarkable life. She had lived fully and on her terms. Born in Passaic, New Jersey in 1937, Loretta was the daughter of Polish immigrants, raised in a working-class home where she grew up with a deep love for performing and a stubborn streak that wouldn't let her give up. Her early years were filled with cheerleading, theater, and basketball, and after working as a secretary and dancer, she finally made her way into acting, studying with Jean Frankel and graduating from the American Academy of Dramatic Arts. Her big break came in the early 70s when she joined MASH, and from then on, Loretta Swit became a household name. But she was more than just a TV star. She was an advocate for animal rights, a devoted vegan since 1981, and founder of Switheart Animal Alliance. She performed in countless plays across America and even took on the role of the first female U.S. president in Whoops Apocalypse. And though MASH defined her fame, it never defined her as a person. She was kind, honest, and passionate about what mattered. In the end, Loretta didn't die from an illness or tragedy. Her body simply grew tired. Yet knowing she's gone still hurts deeply, because she felt like someone we all knew. Her warmth, her eyes, her voice, they were always there, beaming through the screen, making us feel something real. The world has lost a true original. Loretta Swit may have left this world quietly, but her legacy, her laughter, and her courage will echo for generations. Today, we remember Ananda Lewis, a beloved American broadcaster and cultural icon whose voice once defined a generation, but whose life was tragically cut short at just 52 after a long and painful fight with breast cancer. Ananda passed away on June 11, 2025, in hospice care at her home in Los Angeles, surrounded by family and love. Her battle began in 2018 when she found a lump in her breast, and a biopsy revealed it was stage 3 cancer. What followed was a heartbreaking journey of pain, choices, and regret. Ananda chose to go against medical advice and refused the double mastectomy her doctors urged, believing she could heal her body through natural methods, clean living, and spiritual strength. She turned to alternative treatments, 4 drips, qigong, detoxes, but when the pandemic hit, she lost access to care. By 2023, scans showed the cancer had spread to her bones, spine, and hips. In her final interviews, she admitted she wished she'd made different decisions, not out of fear, but because she wanted others to learn from her pain. The physical suffering was immense. She said she'd never felt pain like what the cancer brought. Her body weakened, and by the time she could return to treatment, it was too late. Yet, even in those final months, Ananda remained strong in spirit, writing openly, speaking honestly, and urging women to never skip mammograms like she did, to take care of their bodies, and to fight early. Born in Los Angeles in 1973, Ananda had a rough childhood marked by family separation and emotional distance from both parents. But she was driven. She enrolled herself in a beauty pageant at 8, choreographed her own dance routine, and started acting and performing. Her path led her to Howard University, where she graduated with honors, and then Tibet's Teen Summit, where she tackled real issues affecting young people. She rose to fame in the late 90s as one of MTV's most powerful and admired VJs, co-hosting Total Request Live and Hot Zone, and became known for using her platform to speak truth, even when it was uncomfortable. She later launched The Ananda Lewis Show, determined to move away from sensationalism and instead offer something meaningful. Though the show didn't last long, her impact never faded. She interviewed stars, called out sexism in music videos, and stood firmly for human rights. She also made time for family, becoming a mother to her son Langston and devoting herself to raising him with love. In her final years, Ananda was open about her regrets, especially about delaying treatment and underestimating how dangerous breast cancer could be. She carried pain not just in her body, but in her soul, financial stress, broken relationships, and the pressure of facing death too early. Still, she said she loved hard, lived loud, and had no fear of letting go. Ananda Lewis didn't just host shows, she made people think, feel, and care. Her legacy isn't only in the interviews she did or the awards she won. It's in the warnings she left behind, in her honesty about suffering, and in the strength she showed through the darkest years of her life. She's free now, as her sister wrote, but the lessons she gave this world will stay behind forever. Nina Kusksik, the fearless American long-distance runner who broke barriers for women in sports and became the first official female winner of the Boston Marathon, but whose life came to a quiet and heartbreaking end on June 8, 2025, at the age of 86 after a long, painful battle with Alzheimer's disease and final complications from respiratory failure. Her final days were spent in a hospital in Brookhaven, New York, where her body slowly gave in after years of cognitive decline that had started back in 2014. In those last years, the woman who had once run more than 80 marathons, climbed the Empire State Building, and stood tall against systems that told her no, could no longer even remember those triumphs. The disease stole her memories and her strength, but it could never erase her impact. Born Nina Louise Marmarino in Brooklyn on January 2, 1939, she had been a champion long before she ever laced up a pair of running shoes. She won state titles in speed skating, roller skating, and cycling, all in the same year. She started running in her late 20s only because her bike broke, but she quickly discovered a deep sense of calm and power in it. As a single mother of 3, she ran laps around her block with her children watching, chasing a dream most believed was impossible for a woman. When she first ran the Boston Marathon in 1969, women weren't allowed to enter officially. So she ran anyway, without a bib, without recognition. In 1970, she was the only woman in the first New York City Marathon, but had to drop out due to illness. By 1972, she made history, becoming the first woman to win the Boston Marathon officially, at a time when people still believed women's bodies weren't capable of running 26.2 miles. She didn't just run, she fought. She stood up to the amateur athletic union's rules that made women start separately from men. And at the 1972 New York City Marathon, she and 5 other women sat down in protest at the starting line. 10 minutes later, they began running and showed the world what courage looked like. Nina went on to win that race too, and again the next year. She broke records, ran 50-mile races, and won the Empire State Building run-up 3 years in a row. But even more than her medals, Nina's legacy was in her activism. She spent years lobbying, attending meetings, showing data, and never backing down until women were allowed full access to marathon racing and eventually earned a spot in the Olympic marathon in 1984. Her quiet strength helped generations of women cross finish lines they were once told they didn't belong at. But behind the strength was a full, human life. She became a nurse at just 18 after petitioning the state to change the law, worked at Mount Sinai for decades, and raised 3 children mostly alone. As the Alzheimer's slowly took her memory, those closest to her watched a legend fade, bit by bit. And though her passing was peaceful, it marked the end of a chapter in women's sports that was built on her determination, her fight, and her refusal to accept limits. Nina Kuskic didn't just run marathons. She ran through every wall they tried to put in her way. And while she may be gone, every woman who crosses a finish line today owes part of that victory to Nina. Kim Woodburn, the fiery and unforgettable British television personality who rose from heartbreaking beginnings to become a national icon, but whose life came to a quiet and deeply saddening end on June 16, 2025, at the age of 83 following a short illness that quickly took her from the world she once lit up with her voice, her fire, and her strength. Her husband Peter, heartbroken and devastated, shared that she died peacefully but left an irreplaceable emptiness behind. No further details about her illness were made public, as her family asked for privacy to grieve in peace. But those who followed her knew that even in her final days, Kim was likely as tough as she was vulnerable, battling quietly just as she had done her entire life. Born Patricia Mary Mackenzie in 1942, Kim's early life was marked by unthinkable trauma, physical abuse at the hands of both parents, sexual abuse by her father, and a deep, lifelong pain that never fully left her. She left home at just 16, starting work as a cleaner, and later experienced even more loss when she gave birth to a stillborn baby at 23 and buried him alone in a park, an act that would come to haunt her and later shock readers of her 2006 memoir Unbeaten. That pain, that loss, and the harshness she endured shaped the woman the world came to know on How Clean Is Your House, where she scolded grime-covered homeowners with a sharp tongue but carried decades of silent wounds under that bleach-scrubbing exterior. Paired with co-host Aggie McKenzie in 2003, Kim became an overnight sensation. Her no-nonsense style, towering presence, and signature platinum bun made her impossible to ignore. Millions tuned in to watch her transform disgusting homes and call out laziness with brutal honesty. And while the series was often comedic, Kim's truth was rooted in her own survival. She later appeared on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here in 2009 and Celebrity Big Brother in 2017, where her explosive arguments, especially with Colleen Nolan and Jamie O'Hara, made headlines and defined a whole generation of reality TV drama. But off-screen, she was more than a meme or a catchphrase. She was a woman who had fought for herself when no one else did. In her final public appearance in February 2025, she spoke in an emotional interview about her life, pain, and perseverance. Despite the boldness people saw on TV, she carried her scars quietly, grieving a lost child, living with memories of cruelty, and finding love and safety later in life with her devoted husband. Her death shook fans across the UK and beyond. Tributes poured in from those who had laughed with her, argued with her, or simply admired her for speaking her truth, no matter how harsh it sounded. Her longtime co-star Aggie said it best, "Kim was a tormented soul with deep pain and incredible strength, and she survived because she had to." In the end, the Queen of Clean left not just a career of unforgettable TV moments, but a legacy of raw honesty, resilience, and a reminder that behind every loud voice, there may be a lifetime of silence finally being broken. Anne Burrell, a beloved American chef and television host whose sudden and heartbreaking death at just 55 years old left her fans, friends, and family in total shock. On the morning of June 17, 2025, Anne was found unresponsive in the shower of her Brooklyn apartment, surrounded by what police described as roughly 100 assorted pills, and despite immediate emergency response, she was pronounced dead at the scene. The initial call to 911 suggested she had gone into cardiac arrest, and while the official cause of death is still pending an autopsy, authorities are investigating the possibility of an overdose. A haunting and tragic end for a woman whose energy and passion once filled every room she walked into. Just hours before she passed away, Anne had performed a live improv comedy show and posted online with excitement about it, showing no signs that anything was wrong. Her husband, Stuart Claxton, is said to be in total disbelief, still trying to process the loss of the woman he called the perfect match. Only a day after her private funeral, her ashes were spread across places she loved, while close friends and celebrities like Bobby Flay, Gigi Hadid, and Duff Goldman poured out their grief online. Born in Cazenovia, New York, in 1969, Anne's love for cooking started when she was just 3, inspired by her mother's homemade meals and Julia Child on TV. Though her father didn't support her dream at first, Anne pushed forward, eventually attending the Culinary Institute of America and studying in Italy. She worked in top restaurants, taught at the Institute of Culinary Education, and became a familiar face on Food Network through shows like Secrets of a Restaurant Chef, Chef Wanted, and most notably, Worst Cooks in America, where her bold voice, signature blonde spiky hair, and no-nonsense teaching style made her a fan favorite. Over the years, she helped countless cooking beginners find confidence in the kitchen, all while publishing best-selling cookbooks and appearing on dozens of shows. But behind her public success, Anne carried private struggles that most never saw. Some close to her have recently spoken about the pressure she felt, the exhaustion, and the deep sadness she seemed to hide with a loud laugh and a brave face. Her final season of Worst Cooks in America is still set to air posthumously, a bittersweet farewell that highlights the incredible legacy she leaves behind. And wasn't just a chef, she was a teacher, a motivator, and a fearless presence who made people believe they could do more than they thought. Her death is more than a personal tragedy. It's a reminder of how even the brightest lights can burn out silently. The Food Network called her one of a kind, and her family said it best. Anne's warmth, her joy, and her endless love touched millions and will never be forgotten. Juliette Powell, a brilliant and deeply loved American-Canadian woman whose life was filled with beauty, intelligence, and purpose, and whose sudden passing left so many in shock. Juliette died on June 3, 2025, at the age of 54, from acute bacterial meningitis, an aggressive and often unpredictable infection that took her life far too soon. She passed away unexpectedly in her home in New York City, and the news devastated her friends, colleagues, students, and countless people who had been touched by her light. In her final days, no one expected such a swift and fatal turn in her health. She had been full of energy, engaged in work, planning future projects, and spending time with the people she loved. Her death was not only tragic, but also incredibly sudden, cutting short a life that was still creating change. Juliette's journey began in Manhattan, where she was born in 1970. At the age of 8, she moved with her French-Canadian mother to Montreal. Even as a child, she was a gifted student, shy, but strong in math and science, and a dedicated swimmer. Her path to fame began not from a love of beauty contests, but from a desire to fight injustice. She entered the Miss Montreal pageant after learning that a black contestant had been unfairly denied a win. That fire pushed her to go further, and in 1989, she made history as the first black woman crowned Miss Canada. From there, she stepped into the public eye as a VJ on Musiqueplus and later Muck Music, where she became a fan favorite hosting Electric Circus and French Kiss. Her warm, magnetic personality made her unforgettable on screen. Her work shifted to technology and ethics, and she became a respected advisor to the United Nations, World Economic Forum, and major companies, speaking out about digital privacy, bias in AI, and social media's impact on society. Her books, including 33 Million People in the Room and The AI Dilemma, made her a leading voice in ethical tech. In 2021, she began teaching at NYU, where her students looked up to her not just as an expert, but as a true mentor. Despite all her success, Juliette stayed deeply connected to the people around her, hosting gatherings, lifting others up, and making everyone she met feel special. Her smile, her passion, and her brilliance filled every room. She had just co-founded a consultancy firm and was actively working on new ideas when meningitis took her life without warning. Her passing has left a painful silence in spaces she once lit up. Juliette Powell will be remembered not only for the boundaries she broke, as the first Black Miss Canada, as a TV icon, as a powerful tech ethicist, but also for the love, warmth, and courage she brought into the world. She fought against racism, challenged the flaws in our systems, and helped shape a better future, and her legacy will not be forgotten. Melissa Hortman, a respected lawyer and former Speaker of the Minnesota House of Representatives, who tragically lost her life on June 14, 2025, in what officials have called a politically motivated assassination. Melissa and her husband, Mark, were both shot and killed inside their home in Brooklyn Park by a man disguised as a police officer who also injured a fellow state senator and his wife that same morning. The man behind the attack, Vance Bolter, had a hit list of nearly 70 Democratic lawmakers and activists, and authorities believe he was targeting public officials who supported abortion rights and other progressive causes. In her final hours, Melissa had no idea that opening her door to what appeared to be law enforcement would lead to such a horrifying end. Their dog Gilbert was also wounded and later had to be put down. The sheer violence of that night sent shockwaves through Minnesota and the country, triggering a massive manhunt, the largest in state history, that ended with Bolter's arrest 40 hours later. Melissa's death wasn't just a tragedy. It was an attack on democracy, on decency, and on a woman who gave her life to public service. Born in Fridley, Minnesota, Melissa had been drawn to politics from a young age, watching the 1980 presidential election as a child and dreaming of making a difference. She studied philosophy and political science at Boston University, earned her law degree from the University of Minnesota, and later completed a master's in public administration at Harvard. Her legal work early in her career already showed her strength, winning a landmark housing discrimination case in the 90s. Melissa entered the Minnesota House in 2005, where she served in many roles including Speaker, and became known for her work on clean energy, education, and women's rights. Her leadership on the state's solar energy laws and reproductive health policies made her a trailblazer, and her deep compassion made her beloved across party lines. In the days after her death, thousands came to honor her at the Minnesota State Capitol, where she became the first woman and the first person alongside a pet to ever lie in state. The funeral drew figures like Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, but the most moving tributes came from her children, who carried both their parents to rest. Melissa Hortman was more than a politician. She was a wife, a mother, a neighbor, and a voice for the people. She taught Sunday school, loved to garden, and made a home in the community she served. Her life was full of meaning, and her death left behind an ache that words can barely hold. The world lost a fighter for justice, taken not by illness or accident, but by hate disguised as law. What happened to Melissa was cruel, unjust, and deeply sad, but the love she gave, the good she did, and the light she brought to so many will never be erased. Lynn Hamilton, the beloved American actress, whose warm presence and powerful performances made her a cherished figure in Black television history. Lynn died peacefully at the age of 95 on June 19, 2025, at her home in Chicago, surrounded by her grandchildren, loved ones, and caregivers. The official cause was natural, but those close to her say her body had slowly begun to tire in recent months, and though she remained mentally sharp, her health quietly declined in the final weeks. In her last days, Lynn was mostly resting, spending time with family who comforted her through every breath until the end. Her passing wasn't sudden, but it still hurt deeply. Lynn wasn't just a face on screen. She was someone who represented dignity, heart, and grace in an industry that often overlooked Black women, especially in her early years. Best known for playing Nurse Donna Harris, Fred Sanford's girlfriend on Sanford and Son, and Verdie Foster on The Waltons, Lynn brought strength and love to every character she portrayed. Born on April 25, 1930, in Yazoo City, Mississippi, she moved to Chicago Heights as a child, where she grew up and discovered her love for acting. After studying at the Goodman Theater, she started in community plays before making her Broadway debut in 1959 and her first film role in Shadows the same year. But it was television where she truly left her mark. Her chemistry with Red Fox gave Sanford and Son some of its most human moments, and her role on The Waltons helped show the everyday beauty of Black life during a time when those stories were rarely shown. She also appeared in Roots, The Next Generations, Dangerous Women, The Golden Girls, and so many more across 5 decades. She was the kind of actress who never needed the spotlight to be remembered. She made her presence known through quiet strength. Her marriage to playwright Frank Jenkins lasted 49 years, a rare and beautiful thing in show business, and together they worked on meaningful theater that told important stories. Even though her death came from natural causes, it marks the end of an era, a woman who lived almost a century, touched countless lives, and left behind a legacy that will keep inspiring Black performers for generations. Lynn Hamilton may be gone, but the calm power in her voice, the kindness in her roles, and the pride she carried into every performance will never be forgotten. Terry Louise Fisher, a brilliant American television screenwriter and producer who passed away on June 10, 2025, at the age of 79 in Laguna Hills, California. Her death was quiet and deeply saddening. She died peacefully in her sleep after a long illness that she had kept private from the world. Even those close to her didn't fully know how much she had been suffering in her final months. As time went on, she withdrew more from the public eye, and those who loved her started to sense that something was wrong. But she never wanted sympathy, just peace. Her passing marked the end of a powerful voice in television, especially for women and Black creatives in an industry that hasn't always been kind or fair. Terry wasn't just a writer. She shaped stories that gave depth and power to women on screen, especially through shows like Cagney and Lacey and L.A. Law. She co-created L.A. Law with Stephen Bochco, and though that partnership ended in a public fallout and lawsuit, the work they did together changed the legal drama genre forever. Before all of that, Terry's life started in Chicago, where she was born in 1946. She moved to Los Angeles as a teenager, eventually graduating from UCLA School of Law in 1968. She worked in the LA District Attorney's Office and then shifted to entertainment law, but deep down, she always wanted to write. She followed that dream and wrote 2 novels, A Class Act and Good Behavior, before fully leaving law behind. Her real fame came in the 1980s when she joined Cagney and Lacey, working with her writing partner Steve Brown, and earning major recognition for how she portrayed strong, complex female characters. Then came L.A. Law, the show that made her a household name in television writing, earning her multiple Emmy wins and nominations. Her later projects, like Hooperman and 2000 Malibu Road, may not have lasted long, but they showed her courage to keep creating and trying new things, even when the industry pushed back. She was bold, she was passionate, and she never let the system silence her, even when she had to fight for her place. In her last years, Terry stayed away from the spotlight, spending time with her loved ones and reflecting on a life filled with stories, struggles, and victories. Though her illness took her quietly, her work still speaks loudly. She gave so many women voices, and today, we honor the life she lived and the legacy she leaves behind. Roberta Del Rio, the gifted American singer-songwriter and actress whose haunting voice once brought movie theaters to complete silence and who sadly passed away on June 23, 2025, at the age of 57. She was found dead at her home in Los Angeles, and to this day, her cause of death remains uncertain. The Los Angeles Medical Examiner listed her passing as deferred, meaning the investigation is still ongoing, with no clear answers yet, no public signs of illness, no official word on overdose, no indication of foul play. Just a quiet end to a powerful life, with questions still hanging in the air. What makes her death even more heartbreaking is that she was seen performing less than 2 weeks before her passing, at a special charity screening of Mulholland Drive, the very film that gave her a place in cinematic history. Her nephew shared that she had just spent Father's Day with the family, singing and smiling, and no one imagined that would be the last time they'd hear her voice. Roberta had known pain years ago. She lost her only son, Philip, to cancer, and later in life, she spoke about a botched medical procedure that left her disabled and even temporarily homeless. She carried that heartbreak with her, but never stopped sharing her voice with the world. Her most famous moment came in 2001, when director David Lynch heard her Spanish version of Roy Orbison's Crying, called La Rondo, and built a whole scene around it in Mulholland Drive. That scene, where she sang at Club Silencio with so much pain and beauty, became one of the most unforgettable moments in film history. Though the character collapses mid-song, Roberta was really singing with all her heart in every take. She gave everything she had. That moment made her unforgettable to anyone who saw it. She later worked on other films like Southland Tales, Man on Fire, and Sin City, and performed on stage with artists like Moby and Il Divo. Born in Chula Vista, California, on July 10, 1967, she started her career in San Diego before moving to Los Angeles and then Nashville, where she landed her first record deal and released the album Nobody's Angel. Her voice found a home across genres, from country to cinematic ballads, and she always poured raw emotion into her music. But as much as she gave to the world, life was often cruel to her behind the scenes. She faced personal tragedies that never really left her, and yet she still managed to perform and keep moving forward. Roberta Del Rio didn't chase fame, she chased feeling. Her voice wasn't just about singing, it was about surviving, hurting, loving, and letting that pain come through in every note. Her death came suddenly, quietly, with no warning, and left her fans stunned and grieving. There's no official answer yet as to what took her life, only the heavy silence she left behind. But what remains is the unforgettable sound of La Rondo, echoing like a cry from a broken heart, and the memory of a woman who gave everything to every performance, even when life gave her very little back. Carolyn McCarthy, a former United States representative and one of the most powerful voices in the fight against gun violence, who sadly passed away on June 26, 2025, at the age of 81 after a long and painful battle with lung cancer. Carolyn died peacefully at her home in Fort Myers, Florida, but her final years were marked by quiet suffering. She had announced her diagnosis in 2013, bravely undergoing treatment while continuing to serve the public. And though she survived the initial phase, the disease never truly let her go. She blamed decades of asbestos exposure, having handled the dusty clothes of her father and brother who worked in construction, though she was also a longtime heavy smoker. Her illness slowly wore her down, taking away the vibrant energy of a woman who had once stood boldly in Congress demanding change. Even in her last days, Carolyn remained deeply connected to her past and the mission that defined her life. That mission began tragically in December 1993, when a gunman opened fire on a Long Island Railroad train, killing 6 people including her husband Dennis, and severely injuring her only son Kevin. It was that unimaginable moment of horror that transformed Carolyn from a quiet nurse and mother into a fierce, relentless advocate for gun control. With no political background and little support, She ran for Congress in 1996 and shocked everyone by defeating the incumbent. She served New York's 4th District for 18 years, earning a reputation as the most passionate gun control advocate in Washington, known by many simply as the Gun Lady. Her deep grief fueled her work, from pushing for child-proof gun triggers and stronger background checks, to introducing laws that made it harder for dangerous people to buy weapons. Every mass shooting tore at her heart, from Columbine to Sandy Hook, and she became a familiar face on television in moments of national mourning. But Carolyn was more than just her fight. Born in Brooklyn in 1944, raised in Mineola, she had struggled with dyslexia, but found her calling in nursing after caring for a boyfriend injured in a car accident. That same compassion carried into her work in Congress, where she fought just as hard for education, healthcare, and disability rights. She inspired thousands, not just as a politician, but as a mother who turned the worst moment of her life into a lifelong promise to protect others. Even after leaving Congress in 2015, she remained active, receiving the Presidential Citizens Medal from President Biden for her decades of service. Her son Kevin, now a husband-father, credits her strength and love for helping him recover and carry on. Carolyn McCarthy's story is not just one of tragedy. It's the story of resilience, courage, and a woman who refused to stay silent when it mattered most. She didn't just fight for change. She lived it. And now, as we mourn her passing, we honor the legacy of someone who took her pain and turned it into purpose, reminding us all that even in the darkest moments, one person's voice can still make a difference. Pic Sen Lim, a trailblazing British actress of Chinese-Malaysian descent, who passed away on June 9, 2025, at the age of 80 after a quiet but heartbreaking battle with cancer. Her death was not sudden, but it still hit hard for those who knew her work and her spirit. She had been dealing with illness in her later years, but very few outside her close circle knew how much pain she carried in private. The cancer had slowly taken its toll, and by the time the news came out, she was already gone, leaving behind a deep void in the world of British television and Asian representation in media. In her final days, she kept mostly to herself, reportedly staying in London and surrounded by family, including her daughter Sarah, who is also an actress. Her passing was mourned by colleagues, fans, and especially those from the Asian acting community who saw her as a symbol of endurance and dignity in an industry that often reduced her to stereotypes. Born in Penang, Malaysia, in 1944 during the Japanese occupation, she was the daughter of a wealthy palm oil businessman, but defied her family's plans for a respectable career in law or accounting when she ran away to Britain at the age of 16 to study acting. She started small, but her presence on British television grew big, first as the first Chinese nurse on the medical drama Emergency Ward 10, then as Chin Li in Doctor Who, and eventually gaining worldwide fame as Chung Su Li, the overly patriotic and comedic Chinese student in Mind Your Language. While that role made her famous, it was also painful for her. She later admitted she was forced to speak in broken English and exaggerated accents that felt embarrassing and racially insensitive. Yet she played her part with grace, knowing that even if the roles weren't perfect, her presence mattered. Over 6 decades, she appeared in everything from Coronation Street and The Bill to Little Britain, Johnny English Reborn, where she famously played the killer cleaner, and more recently in Vampire Academy and The Nevers. She even became a haunting voice in the gaming world, narrating the opening scenes of Dark Souls and Dark Souls 3, leaving fans forever quoting her eerie lines. But behind that long and varied career was a woman who faced constant rejection, typecasting, and quiet heartbreak. She was divorced before her husband died, lost many roles to younger faces in her later years, and never got the kind of widespread recognition she truly deserved. Friends described her as full of laughter, mischief, and brutally honest about the racism she endured in the industry. Her death from cancer was the end of a long, slow decline, but even then, she never publicly complained. She kept showing up when she could, even voicing roles in her 70s. Pic Sen Lim wasn't just another actress. She was a first, a fighter, a survivor in a business that rarely made room for women like her. She broke barriers just by being there. And now that she's gone, what remains is not just her work, but the way she carried herself through it all, with courage, honesty, and a voice that, once heard, could never be forgotten. Michaela Raines, a brave and deeply compassionate soul who dedicated her life to saving animals, especially foxes, before her tragic passing on June 20, 2025, at just 30 years old. Michaela died by suicide at her home in Faribault, Minnesota, after a long and painful battle with mental health struggles, made even heavier by years of relentless online harassment. Her husband, Ethan Frankamp, who found her and desperately tried to revive her with CPR before paramedics arrived, later shared the heartbreaking truth. Michaela had been carrying more than anyone knew. She struggled with autism and borderline personality disorder, and despite seeking therapy and medication, nothing could ease the pain she kept hidden. The constant negativity from some online communities, and even people she once considered friends, became too much, breaking the spirit of someone who had always put animals and others before herself. Michaela wasn't just an animal rescuer. She was a fighter who started bottle feeding foxes at 15 and turned that love into Save a Fox Rescue, the largest fox rescue in the country. She saved hundreds of animals from fur farms and helped many more that others had given up on, even spending over $1 million in her final year trying to rehome 500 surrendered foxes. Her YouTube videos, filled with gentle moments of her cuddling foxes and educating the world, touched millions. But behind the viral success was a woman barely holding on, pouring every ounce of herself into the animals she adored. Her sanctuary, which she built from scratch, was her life's mission. Despite the personal toll, she never stopped giving, feeding, medicating, comforting, and fundraising around the clock. Michaela's story is not just about the animals she rescued, but also about the emotional weight of carrying so much love and feeling so little in return. Her daughter Freya, just 3 years old, now grows up without the mother who gave everything to make the world kinder. Michaela's death has started a long overdue conversation about the cruelty of online bullying, the silent battles people fight, and how even those who seem strong can be hurting deeply. She was born in Burnsville, Minnesota, raised by a mother who worked in wildlife rehab, and by her early 20s had already changed the lives of countless animals and people. She leaves behind not only a grieving family, but a broken-hearted community who saw her as a light. Michaela Raines was more than her suffering. She was love in action. And though she's gone, her mission lives on through those she inspired and the animals who knew her as their only hope.